A millionaire is approached by a little beggar on the street who pleads with him, "Please, sir, buy my drawing." When he saw the drawing, he was completely frozen. Dr. Alexander Hartley stood at the window of his penthouse office, gazing out at the glittering Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, a fitting backdrop for a man who had reached the pinnacle of his profession. At 45, he was one of the most sought-after cardiologists in the country, with a reputation for performing miracles where others saw only hopelessness. As he sipped his expensive scotch, the amber liquid warming his throat, Alexander reflected on his latest triumph. Just hours ago, he had successfully completed a groundbreaking procedure, saving the life of a prominent senator's wife. The medical community would be buzzing about it for weeks, maybe even months. It was moments like these that validated all the sacrifices he had made to get here. Yet as the adrenaline of the day faded, a familiar emptiness crept in. Alexander set down his glass and ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, sighing deeply. The view from the top was breathtaking, but it was also terribly lonely. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from his publicist, Linda. "Fantastic work today, Alex. You're trending on medical Twitter. The Today Show wants you for an interview tomorrow morning. Shall I confirm?" Alexander typed a quick affirmative response, then tossed the phone onto his desk. Another interview, another chance to showcase his brilliance to the world. It should have excited him, but instead it felt like just another item on an endless to-do list. He turned away from the window and looked around his office. The walls were adorned with framed awards, certificates, and newspaper clippings chronicling his achievements. In one corner stood a sleek modern sculpture, a gift from a grateful patient whose life he had saved. Everything in the room spoke of success, of a life dedicated to the pursuit of excellence. But there, tucked away on a small shelf behind his desk, was something that didn't quite fit with the rest of the decor. It was a small wooden figurine of a bird in flight, crudely carved but full of character. Alexander walked over and picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. The figurine had been a gift from his father, Tom, a skilled artisan who had spent his life creating beautiful things with his hands. Alexander could still remember the day his father had given it to him, on his 18th birthday, just before he left for college. "Remember, Alex," his father had said, his calloused hands gently placing the bird in Alexander's palm. "No matter how high you fly, never forget where you came from." A lump formed in Alexander's throat as he thought of his parents. It had been years since he'd last visited them in their modest home in rural Illinois. His mother, Sarah, a talented painter, had always encouraged his creative side, urging him to see the beauty in the world around him. But somewhere along the way, in his relentless pursuit of success, he had left that part of himself behind. Alexander set the figurine back on the shelf, his fingers lingering on its worn surface for a moment longer than necessary. He shook his head, trying to dispel the uncomfortable thoughts. He had a life many would envy. Wealth, prestige, the ability to save lives. What more could he possibly want? A knock on the door interrupted his reverie. "Dr. Hartley." It was Nurse Chen, one of the few staff members who dared to approach him directly. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation in the ER that requires your attention." Alexander straightened his tie and slipped back into his professional persona. "What is it, Nurse Chen?" "A 6-year-old boy with a severe congenital heart defect. The on-call surgeon doesn't want to touch it, says it's too risky. The mother is, well, she's desperate, sir. She's asking for you specifically." For a moment, Alexander hesitated. He was off the clock and tomorrow would be busy with the interview and his regular caseload. But something in Nurse Chen's voice, a note of urgency he rarely heard, made him pause. "All right," he said, reaching for his white coat. "I'll take a look." As they walked briskly through the hospital corridors, Nurse Chen briefed him on the case. The boy's condition was indeed dire, a complex defect that had gone undetected until now. Most surgeons would balk at the challenge, preferring to avoid the risk of losing a patient on the table. They reached the ER, and Alexander could hear the sobs of a distraught woman before he even entered the room. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. As a rule, he tried not to get emotionally involved in his cases. It was better that way, cleaner. But something about this felt different. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The small room was crowded with equipment, beeping monitors surrounding a tiny figure on the bed. The boy looked even younger than his 6 years, pale and fragile against the stark white sheets. Beside him, clutching his hand, sat a woman who could only be his mother. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her clothes rumpled as if she had been wearing them for days. As soon as she saw Alexander, the woman stood up, hope flickering across her tear-stained face. "Dr. Hartley," she said, her voice hoarse, "please, you have to help my son. They say you're the best, that you can do things no one else can." Alexander approached the bed, his eyes scanning the monitors, taking in the boy's vital signs. The situation was indeed as grave as Nurse Chen had indicated. He picked up the chart, flipping through the pages with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Evans," the woman supplied. "I'm Sandra Evans, and this is my son, Timmy." Alexander nodded, his mind already racing through potential treatment options. "Mrs. Evans, I understand you've been told about the severity of Timmy's condition. I want you to know that I'll do everything in my power to help, but I need to be honest with you. This is a very complex case." Sandra's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "But you'll try, won't you? You won't give up on him like the others?" There was something in her plea that struck a chord deep within Alexander. He found himself thinking of his own mother, of the unwavering support she had always given him. Before he could stop himself, he reached out and placed a hand on Sandra's shoulder. "I promise you, Mrs. Evans, I will give this case my full attention. We're going to fight for Timmy with everything we've got." The words surprised him, as much as they seemed to comfort Sandra. It wasn't like him to make such personal commitments to patients or their families, but as he looked at the small boy on the bed, something stirred within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. As if sensing the shift in the room, Timmy's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Alexander with a gaze that seemed far too wise for his years. "Are you going to fix my heart, doctor?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexander found himself smiling, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm certainly going to try, Timmy, but I need you to be brave and strong for me. Can you do that?" Timmy nodded solemnly, then reached for something on the bedside table. It was a piece of paper, a drawing done in crayon. "I made this for you," he said, holding it out to Alexander. "Mom says it might help." As Alexander took the drawing, his breath caught in his throat. There, rendered in childish strokes but unmistakable in its form, was a bird in flight, almost identical to the wooden figurine in his office. He stared at it, a strange feeling of déjà vu washing over him. "It's beautiful, Timmy," he said softly, carefully folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. "Thank you." As he left the room, promising to return soon with a treatment plan, Alexander felt as if something had shifted within him. The emptiness that had plagued him earlier seemed to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know it yet, but this case, this small boy with the failing heart and the gift for drawing birds, was about to change everything. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to paint the Chicago sky when Dr. Alexander Hartley found himself back in his office. He hadn't gone home. Instead, he'd spent the night poring over Timmy Evans' medical records, searching for a solution that seemed to elude him at every turn. Coffee cups littered his desk, testament to the long hours he'd put in. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, and a day's worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. But his eyes were bright with determination as he studied the complex diagrams of Timmy's heart. As he reached for yet another medical journal, his gaze fell on the wooden bird figurine. In the soft morning light, it seemed to come alive, its wings poised as if ready to take flight. Alexander picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The memory of Timmy's crayon drawing flashed in his mind, and he pulled the folded paper from his pocket, smoothing it out on the desk. The similarity was uncanny. How could a child he'd never met before create a drawing so similar to a cherished memento from his past? Alexander shook his head, trying to focus on the medical challenge at hand. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this case, something that went beyond his professional expertise. A knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. It was Dr. Marcus Reeves, the hospital's chief of surgery, and Alexander's longtime rival. Marcus entered without waiting for an invitation, his impeccably pressed suit a stark contrast to Alexander's rumpled appearance. "Burning the midnight oil, Hartley?" Marcus asked, his tone a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "I heard you've taken on the Evans boys' case. Quite the lost cause, isn't it?" Alexander bristled at the implication. "No case is a lost cause, Marcus. You, of all people, should know that." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over the cluttered desk. "Come now, Alexander. We both know the risks involved. The boy's heart is barely functional. Any attempt at surgery would be, well, let's just say it wouldn't reflect well on the hospital's success rates. Is that all you care about? Success rates?" Alexander stood up, anger flaring in his chest. "There's a child's life at stake here. And there are hundreds of other lives we could save with less risk and more certainty," Marcus countered smoothly. "I'm not saying it's fair, but we have to be pragmatic. You used to understand that." The words stung because they held a grain of truth. There was a time when Alexander would have agreed with Marcus, when he would have looked at Timmy's case as nothing more than a statistic, a potential blemish on his perfect record. But something had changed. The pleading look in Sandra Evans's eyes, the quiet courage of little Timmy, the mysterious echo of his past in a child's drawing, all of it had awakened something in Alexander that he thought he'd left behind long ago. "I'm going to help this boy, Marcus," he said firmly. "And I don't give a damn about success rates or hospital politics. If you're not going to support me, then at least stay out of my way." Marcus held up his hands in a placating gesture. All right, it's your reputation on the line after all. It's your. Just don't say I didn't warn you." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Oh, and Alexander, you might want to clean yourself up. You look like hell." As the door closed behind Marcus, Alexander slumped back into his chair, the weight of the challenge ahead pressing down on him. He glanced at his reflection in the window. Marcus was right, he did look like hell. But for the first time in years he felt alive, driven by something more than just professional ambition. He was about to return to his research when his phone buzzed. It was a reminder about his scheduled interview on the Today Show. Alexander groaned, having completely forgotten about it in the whirlwind of the past 12 hours. For a moment he considered cancelling. The old Alexander would never have missed such an opportunity for publicity. But as he reached for the phone, his eyes fell on Timmy's drawing once again. The smiling bird seemed to be challenging him, asking him what really mattered. With a decisive swipe, he dismissed the reminder. There would be other interviews, other chances to bask in the spotlight. Right now, there was a little boy who needed him, a puzzle that needed solving. Alexander stood up, stretching his tired muscles. He needed a shower, a change of clothes, and probably another gallon of coffee. But first, he had a promise to keep. He made his way down to Timmy's room in the pediatric ward. The boy was awake, sitting up in bed and working on another drawing. Sandra Evans was curled up in a chair beside him, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she too had spent a sleepless night. "Good morning, Timmy," Alexander said softly, not wanting to startle them. "How are you feeling today?" Timmy looked up, his face lighting up with a smile that seemed to brighten the whole room. "Dr. Hartley, look, I made another picture for you." Alexander approached the bed, genuinely curious. This time the drawing showed two birds, one large and one small, flying together towards a bright sun. The symbolism wasn't lost on him, and he felt a lump forming in his throat. "It's wonderful, Timmy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have a real talent." Sandra stirred in her chair, blinking up at Alexander. "Dr. Hartley, have you found anything? Is there hope?" Alexander pulled up a chair, sitting down so he was at eye level with both of them. "Mrs. Evans, Timmy, I want you to know that I've been working all night on your case. It's not going to be easy. The surgery we need to perform is incredibly complex, with significant risks." He saw the hope start to fade from Sandra's eyes and quickly continued, "But I believe it's possible. I've developed a new approach that I think could work. It's never been done before, which means there are no guarantees. But if you're willing to trust me, I'm ready to fight for Timmy with everything I've got." Sandra reached out, grasping Alexander's hand. "You're really willing to try, when everyone else said it was hopeless?" Alexander nodded, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "I am, but I need you both to understand the risks. This surgery, it's going to be the fight of Timmy's life, And I need you, Timmy, to be the bravest, strongest boy you can be. Can you do that for me?" Timmy sat up straighter, a determined look on his young face. "I can be brave, Dr. Hartley. I promise." "That's my boy," Sandra whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. As Alexander began to explain the procedure in terms they could understand, he felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for far too long. This wasn't about adding another accolade to his wall or another line to his resume. This was about saving a life, about giving hope where there had been none. He thought about the wooden bird figurine in his office, about his parents and the values they had instilled in him. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of what really mattered. But now, looking at the hope in Timmy's eyes and the trust in Sandra's, he felt as if he was rediscovering a part of himself he'd thought was long gone. The commotion in the hallway grew louder, drawing Dr. Alexander Hartley's attention away from Timmy and Sandra. He rose from his chair, moving towards the door with a mix of curiosity and concern. As he stepped into the corridor, he was met with a flurry of activity, nurses rushing past, the squeak of gurney wheels, and the urgent voices of his colleagues. "What's going on?" Alexander called out to a passing nurse. "Multi-car pile-up on the expressway, Dr. Hartley," she responded breathlessly. "We're getting slammed with trauma cases. All hands on deck." For a moment, Alexander hesitated. He glanced back at Timmy's room, where the boy and his mother were watching him with worried expressions. Then he looked down the hallway, where his skills were desperately needed. The conflict was written across his face, the promise he'd made to Timmy versus his duty as a surgeon. "Go," Sandra said softly from behind him. "We understand. There are other people who need you right now." Alexander nodded gratefully, then turned to Timmy. "I'll be back as soon as I can, champ. Keep working on those drawings for me, okay?" With a reassuring smile, he joined the stream of medical staff heading towards the emergency room. The next several hours were a blur of activity, assessing patients, performing emergency procedures and coordinating with his team. Despite the chaos, Alexander found himself operating with a clarity and purpose he hadn't felt in years. Each life saved, each crisis averted, reminded him of why he'd become a doctor in the first place. It was late afternoon by the time things calmed down enough for Alexander to catch his breath. He was washing up after his final procedure when Dr. Marcus Reeves appeared beside him, looking as immaculate as ever despite the day's events. "Impressive work today, Hartley," Marcus said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "I saw you in there with the truck driver. Tricky business with that aortic dissection." Alexander nodded, accepting the rare compliment. "Thanks, Marcus. It was touch and go for a while, but we pulled through." There was a moment of awkward silence between them, the memory of their earlier confrontation hanging in the air. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice lower this time. "Look, about the Evans boy, but I've been thinking, maybe I was too hasty in my judgment. The board's been asking questions about your plans for the surgery." Alexander tensed, sensing there was more to this conversation than a simple change of heart. "And what did you tell them?" Marcus shrugged, his casual gesture at odds with the calculating look in his eyes. "I told them you were exploring all options. But Alexander, you have to understand the position this puts us in. If word gets out that we're attempting such a risky procedure on a child, we'll be giving hope to a family that had none," Alexander finished firmly. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do as doctors?" "Hope is a double-edged sword, my friend," Marcus replied. "If this doesn't work out, the fallout could be catastrophic for the hospital, for your career." Alexander dried his hands, turning to face Marcus fully. "Is that a threat?" Marcus held up his hands defensively. "Not at all. Consider it friendly advice. There are other cases, less risky ones, that could benefit from your skills. Why not focus on those?" The implication was clear. Back away from Timmy's case or face the consequences. For a moment, Alexander felt a flicker of doubt. Was he really willing to risk everything he'd built for this one case? Before he could respond, his pager buzzed. It was a message from Nurse Chen. "Dr. Hartley, please come to Timmy's room immediately." Without another word to Marcus, Alexander hurried towards the pediatric ward, his heart racing. Had something gone wrong? As he approached Timmy's room, he could hear raised voices inside. He pushed open the door to find Sandra Evans in tears, while a man he didn't recognize stood by Timmy's bed, his posture aggressive. Timmy himself was curled up in his bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than ever. "What's going on here?" Alexander demanded, his authoritative tone cutting through the tension in the room. Sandra turned to him, relief washing over her face. "Dr. Hartley, thank God. This is my ex-husband, Brian, Timmy's father." The man, Brian, whirled to face Alexander, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and anger. "Are you the one who's filling my ex-wife's head with false hope? Do you have any idea what you're putting my son through?" Alexander took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "Mr. Evans, I understand your concern. Why don't we step outside and discuss this?" But Brian wasn't having it. "No, we'll discuss it right here. I've seen the reports, doctor. I know the risks of this surgery. How dare you use my son as some kind of guinea pig for your experimental procedures?" The accusation stung, echoing the doubts that Marcus had tried to plant earlier. Alexander glanced at Timmy, who was watching the scene with wide, frightened eyes. In that moment, he made a decision. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice firm but compassionate, "I assure you, I'm not using your son for anything. The procedure I'm proposing is complex, yes, and it carries risks, but it's also Timmy's best chance, his only chance, at a normal life." Brian scoffed, but Alexander pressed on. "I know you're scared. Believe me, I understand the weight of this decision. But I promise you, I wouldn't be suggesting this if I didn't believe with every fiber of my being that it was the right thing to do." There must have been something in Alexander's voice, some note of sincerity that cut through Brian's anger. The man's shoulders slumped, and when he spoke again, his voice was choked with emotion. "He's my little boy," Brian said softly. I can't lose him." Alexander placed a hand on Brian's shoulder. "I know, and I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen." As the tension in the room slowly dissipated, Alexander found himself thinking about the wooden bird figurine in his office, about his own parents, and about the path that had led him to this moment. He realized that he wasn't just fighting for Timmy's life, he was fighting for his own soul, for the ideals he'd once held dear and somehow lost along the way. Looking at the united family before him, Sandra and Brian setting aside their differences for their son's sake, and Timmy bravely facing whatever came next, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges both medical and personal. But for the first time in years, he was certain he was on the right path. As he left the room to begin preparations for the most important surgery of his career, Alexander didn't notice the small figure watching him from the end of the hallway, a young girl with knowing eyes and a sketchpad clutched to her chest. She smiled softly, then disappeared around the corner, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of hope in the sterile hospital air. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Dr. Alexander Hartley. He threw himself into preparations for Timmy's surgery with an intensity that surprised even his most dedicated colleagues. His office became a war room of sorts, walls covered with diagrams of the heart, printouts of the latest research, and, somewhat incongruously, Timmy's colorful drawings. In quiet moments, Alexander found his gaze drawn to these childish sketches. The birds that featured so prominently in them seemed to watch him, their simple lines carrying a weight of meaning he couldn't quite grasp. He thought often of the wooden figurine his father had carved, now sitting on his desk as a sort of talisman. As he worked, Alexander became aware of a change within himself. The drive for perfection was still there, but it was tempered now by something else. A genuine desire to help, to heal not just bodies but spirits. He found himself spending more time with his patients, listening to their fears and hopes, offering comfort as well as medical expertise. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Nurse Chen, who had worked with Alexander for years, commented on it one evening as they were reviewing Timmy's latest test results. "You seem different lately, Dr. Hartley," she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "More, I don't know, present?" Alexander looked up from the charts, surprised by the observation. "Different? How so?" Chen shrugged, but her eyes were knowing. You've always been an excellent surgeon, but now it's like you're remembering why you became a doctor in the first place." Her words struck a chord in Alexander. He thought back to his younger self, fresh out of medical school, filled with idealism and a burning desire to make a difference. Somewhere along the way, that idealism had been buried under layers of ambition and the relentless pursuit of success. Now, it felt like those layers were being peeled away, revealing the core of who he truly was, or perhaps who he was meant to be. As the day of Timmy's surgery approached, Alexander found himself spending more time in the boy's room. He was ostensibly there to monitor Timmy's condition and prepare him for the procedure, but he found an unexpected solace in the child's presence. Timmy, despite the gravity of his situation, maintained a spirit of optimism that was infectious. He continued to draw, filling page after page with vibrant scenes, always featuring birds in flight. Alexander noticed that the birds in these newer drawings often appeared in pairs, one larger and one smaller, flying side by side. "That's you and me, Dr. Hartley," Timmy explained when asked about the drawings. "We're going to fly together, and you're going to fix my heart." The simple faith in the boy's words both humbled and terrified Alexander. The weight of Timmy's trust pressed on him, a constant reminder of what was at stake. It was during one of these visits, just 2 days before the scheduled surgery, that something unexpected happened. Alexander was checking Timmy's vital signs when Sandra Evans entered the room, looking flustered. "Dr. Hartley, I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice tinged with worry. There's someone here to see you. She says it's important." Alexander frowned, puzzled. "Who is it?" Before Sandra could answer, a small figure darted past her into the room. It was a young girl, no more than 12 or 13, with tangled dark hair and clothes that had seen better days. In her arms, she clutched a battered sketchpad. "Please, you have to help me," the girl cried, her eyes wild with desperation. "My brother, he's sick. Nobody else will help us." Alexander was taken aback by the girl's sudden appearance and her frantic plea. He glanced at Sandra, who looked equally bewildered. "Slow down," he said gently, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. "What's your name? And what's wrong with your brother?" The girl took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm herself. "I'm Lily, my brother. His name is Max. He has a bad heart like Timmy. I heard the nurses talking about you, saying you were going to do a special surgery. Please, can you help Max too?" Alexander's mind reeled. Another child with a severe heart condition? And how had this girl managed to get into the hospital unnoticed? He was about to call for security when Timmy's voice piped up from the bed. "Dr. Hartley, look, it's the girl from my dreams." All eyes turned to Timmy, who was sitting up in bed, pointing at Lily with an expression of wonder. "I've seen her in my dreams. She was always drawing birds, just like me." A chill ran down Alexander's spine. The coincidence was too strange to ignore. He turned back to Lily, noticing for the first time the sketch pad she held so tightly. "May I see your drawings?" he asked softly. With trembling hands, Lily opened the sketch pad. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. Page after page was filled with drawings of birds, the same style, the same themes as Timmy's artwork. But these birds were often depicted in distress, with broken wings or caught in storms. As he flipped through the pages, a loose sheet fell out. Alexander picked it up and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. It was a drawing of a man, unmistakably himself, standing before 2 children. In his hands, he held a glowing heart. How did you draw this?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily shrugged, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know, I just draw what I see in my head. Please, Dr. Hartley, will you help my brother?" Alexander looked from Lily to Timmy, then back to the drawing in his hands. He felt as if he was standing on the edge of something profound, a mystery that went beyond medical science and touched on something deeper, something almost spiritual. In that moment, he made a decision that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in that room. "Lily," he said, his voice firm with resolve, "I want you to take me to your brother right now." Sandra gasped. "But Dr. Hartley, what about Timmy's surgery? It's in 2 days." Alexander stood, a new energy coursing through him. "Timmy's condition is stable. We can delay for a day if necessary." He turned to Lily. "Where is your brother?" He's not far," Lily said, hope dawning in her eyes. "I can take you to him." As they prepared to leave, Alexander caught sight of his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him was different from the one who had entered this hospital just days ago. His eyes were alight with purpose, his stance that of a man who had found his true calling. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew with certainty that he was meant to follow it. As he followed Lily out of the room, with Sandra and Timmy watching in amazement, Alexander felt as if he were stepping into a new chapter of his life, one filled with challenges, certainly, but also with the promise of redemption and the opportunity to make a real difference in the world. Little did he know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test him to his very limits, forcing him to confront not just his professional abilities, but the very essence of who he was as a person. The journey ahead would be fraught with obstacles, ethical dilemmas, and moments of doubt, but it would also lead him to discoveries about himself and the nature of healing that he never could have imagined. As they left the hospital, the wooden bird figurine on Alexander's desk seemed to come alive in the fading sunlight, its wings spread wide as if preparing for flight. The journey had only just begun. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as Dr. Alexander Hartley followed Lily through a maze of narrow streets. They had left the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago behind, venturing into a part of the city that Alexander had never seen before. A world of crumbling buildings, trash-strewn alleys, and wary eyes that watched their progress from darkened doorways. "How much further?" Alexander asked, his voice hushed. He was acutely aware of how out of place he looked in his expensive suit and polished shoes. Lily glanced back at him, her face a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Just a little bit more. We have a place we stay." As they turned another corner, Alexander's mind raced. What was he doing? He had left the hospital on the spur of the moment, following a child he didn't know into one of the most dangerous parts of the city. It was reckless, potentially career-ending if anything went wrong, yet something deeper than logic drove him forward, a sense that this was where he needed to be. Finally, Lily came to a stop in front of an abandoned warehouse. The windows were boarded up, and a heavy chain secured the main door. But Lily seemed unfazed. She led Alexander around to the back, where a portion of the wall had crumbled away, creating a small opening. "Through here," she said, squeezing through the gap with practiced ease. Alexander hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and followed. The interior of the warehouse was dim, lit only by shafts of fading sunlight that filtered through cracks in the ceiling. The air was thick with dust and the musty smell of decay. "Max?" Lily called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Max! I brought help!" There was a rustling sound from a far corner, and then a weak voice responded. "Lily, is that you?" Alexander's medical instincts kicked in at the sound of that voice. He could hear the strain in it, the labored breathing that spoke of a heart struggling to do its job. He followed Lily as she picked her way through piles of debris towards the source of the voice. In the farthest corner of the warehouse, hidden behind a makeshift barrier of old crates and tattered blankets, they found Max. The boy was lying on a thin mattress, his face pale and drawn with pain. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but his eyes held a weariness that spoke of a life lived hard and fast. "Max," Lily said softly, kneeling beside her brother, "this is Dr. Hartley. He's going to help you." Max's eyes widened as they fell on Alexander. "A real doctor," he whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. Alexander knelt down beside the boy, his heart aching at the sight. "That's right, Max. I'm here to help. Can you tell me where it hurts?" As Max described his symptoms, the chest pain, the shortness of breath, the dizziness, Alexander listened intently, his trained ear picking up on telltale signs of a serious cardiac condition. He wished he had his medical bag with him, but he made do with what he had, using his hands to feel Max's pulse, checking his temperature, observing his breathing patterns. "How long has he been like this?" Alexander asked Lily, his voice low and urgent. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "It's been getting worse for months. We don't have anyone to help us. Our mom." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Alexander nodded, understanding the unspoken tragedy. These children were alone in the world, surviving by their wits and each other's love. The injustice of it struck him like a physical blow. "Max," he said gently, "I need to get you to a hospital. Your heart needs immediate attention." Fear flashed across Max's face. "No, they'll separate us, put us in the system. I can't leave Lily." Alexander looked between the two siblings, seeing the fierce protectiveness in Lily's eyes, the terror in Max's. He thought of his own childhood, of the love and support his parents had given him. These children had no one but each other. In that moment, Alexander made a decision that would change all of their lives forever. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm but kind. "I promise you, both of you, that I won't let anyone separate you. But Max, if we don't get you help soon, you could—" He couldn't bring himself to say the word, but they all understood. Lily gripped her brother's hand tightly. "Please, Max, let Dr. Hartley help you. I'll be with you the whole time, I promise." After a long moment, Max nodded weakly. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Alexander wasted no time. He scooped Max up in his arms, surprised at how light the boy was. "Lily, grab anything you need. We're leaving now." As they made their way out of the warehouse, Alexander's mind was already racing ahead. He knew he was breaking every rule in the book, possibly risking his entire career. But looking down at the frail boy in his arms and the determined girl at his side, he knew he was doing the right thing. They emerged onto the street just as the last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky. Alexander hailed a taxi, ignoring the driver's suspicious look as they piled in. "Chicago Memorial Hospital," he said firmly. "And hurry." As the taxi wove through the evening traffic, Alexander felt as if he were crossing a threshold, leaving behind the carefully constructed world he had built for himself and stepping into something new and unknown. He looked at Max, barely conscious in his arms, and Lily, her face a mask of worry and hope. "It's going to be okay," he told them, and for the first time in years, he truly believed his own words. "We're going to face this together." The taxi sped through the night, carrying them towards a future none of them could have imagined. And somewhere in the back of Alexander's mind, he saw an image of two birds, one large, one small, taking flight together, soaring towards a bright and uncertain horizon. The emergency room of Chicago Memorial Hospital erupted into controlled chaos as Dr. Alexander Hartley burst through the doors, Max cradled in his arms and Lily close at his heels. "I need a gurney here, Stat," Alexander shouted, his authoritative voice cutting through the usual ER din. Nurses and orderlies rushed to respond, their eyes widening as they recognized the renowned cardiologist in his disheveled state. As Max was carefully transferred to a gurney, Alexander rattled off a series of orders. "I want a full cardiac workup, chest x-rays, and prep an OR. Page Dr. Chen and tell her to meet me in imaging." Lily clung to her brother's hand, her face pale with fear. "You promised," she whispered to Alexander. "You promised we'd stay together." Alexander knelt down to meet her eyes. "And I'm keeping that promise. Lily, I need you to be brave now. Let the nurses take care of Max for a few minutes. I'll be right back, and I won't let anyone take you away from him. Do you trust me?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her jaw set with determination. Alexander squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before rushing off to change into scrubs and wash up. As he scrubbed his hands, staring at his reflection in the mirror, Alexander barely recognized himself. His hair was disheveled, his eyes wild with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. But there was something else there too, a fire he hadn't seen in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond professional ambition. Dr. Chen found him there, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "Dr. Hartley, what's going on? The nurses said you brought in a critical cardiac case, but it's not on any of our schedules." Alexander took a deep breath, then launched into a rapid explanation of the situation with Max and Lily. As he spoke, he could see the mixture of emotions playing across Chen's face: surprise, concern, and finally, a grudging admiration. "You know this could get you into serious trouble. she said when he finished, bringing in unregistered patients, promising to keep them together. It's against every protocol we have. I know, Alexander replied, his voice steady. But sometimes, Chen, we have to follow our hearts instead of our rulebooks. Are you with me on this? Chen studied him for a long moment, then a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Well, someone has to keep you out of trouble. Let's go save this kid. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Alexander and Chen pored over Max's test results, confirming what Alexander had suspected, a severe congenital heart defect that had gone untreated for far too long. The boy's heart was barely functioning, and without immediate intervention, his prognosis was grim. As they prepared for surgery, Alexander made sure to keep his promise to Lily. He arranged for her to stay in a private waiting room with a kind-hearted nurse assigned to look after her. He brought her updates on Max's condition whenever he could, marveling at the girl's strength and resilience. Just as they were about to wheel Max into surgery, Lily appeared at her brother's side, clutching her ever-present sketchpad. I made this for you, she said, tearing out a page and pressing it into Alexander's hand. It's for luck. Alexander looked down at the drawing. It showed a large bird sheltering two smaller ones beneath its wings, all of them soaring through a storm towards a bright sun. The symbolism wasn't lost on him, and he felt a lump form in his throat. Thank you, Lily, he said softly. I'll keep it with me during the surgery. As he entered the OR, Alexander felt a sense of calm settle over him. This was where he belonged, doing what he was meant to do. The complexities of the situation, the ethical dilemmas, the potential consequences, all faded away. There was only the patient, the challenge, and his skill. The surgery was long and grueling, pushing Alexander to the very limits of his abilities. Max's heart was in worse shape than they had initially thought, requiring Alexander to improvise and draw on every ounce of his experience and creativity. Hours ticked by, the tension in the OR palpable. More than once they nearly lost Max, his fragile heart struggling to keep beating. But each time, Alexander found a way to bring him back, his hands moving with a surety that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself. As dawn broke over Chicago, casting a pale light through the OR windows, Alexander made the final suture. He stepped back, his scrubs drenched in sweat, and looked at the monitors. Max's heart was beating, weak and uneven, but beating. We did it, Chen breathed, the awe evident in her voice. I've never seen anything like that, Dr. Hartley. It was like watching an artist at work. Alexander nodded, too exhausted to speak. As the team began the process of closing up and preparing Max for post-op care, he slipped out of the OR and made his way to the waiting room where Lily had spent the night. He found her curled up in a chair, her sketchpad open on her lap. She had fallen asleep mid-drawing, her pencil still clutched in her hand. The nurse assigned to watch her looked up as Alexander entered, a question in her eyes. He made it, Alexander said softly. The surgery was successful. Lily stirred at the sound of his voice, blinking awake. Dr. Hartley, is Max? He's going to be okay, Alexander assured her, kneeling down beside her chair. Your brother is very strong, just like you. Lily's face crumpled, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. Without thinking, Alexander gathered her into his arms, letting her sob against his chest. In that moment, he felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. As Lily's sobs subsided, Alexander gently pulled back to look at her. Lily, we need to talk about what happens next. I promised you and Max would stay together, and I'm going to keep that promise. But we need to figure out a safe place for you both. Lily wiped her eyes, her gaze serious beyond her years. What's going to happen to us, Dr. Hartley? Before Alexander could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught his attention. He turned to see Dr. Marcus Reeves striding towards them, his face thunderous. Hartley, Reeves barked. My office now. We need to talk about what you've done. Alexander stood, placing himself protectively in front of Lily. He knew the storm that was coming, the questions, the accusations, the potential consequences of his actions, but looking down at Lily's trusting face and thinking of Max recovering in the ICU, he felt no regret. It's okay, he told Lily softly. I'll be back soon. Remember, I made you a promise. As he followed Reeves down the hallway, Alexander felt as if he were walking into a new chapter of his life. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew with absolute certainty that he was on the right path. The wooden bird figurine on his office desk seemed to flash through his mind, a reminder of where he came from and a symbol of the journey ahead. Whatever happened next, Alexander Hartley was ready to spread his wings and fly. The walk to Dr. Marcus Reeves's office felt like the longest of Alexander Hartley's life. Each step echoed in the sterile hospital hallway, a countdown to what he knew would be a confrontation that could change the course of his career and his life. As they entered the office, Marcus gestured sharply for Alexander to take a seat. The room was immaculate, every surface polished to a high sheen, awards and accolades lining the walls. It was a stark reminder of the world Alexander had been a part of until just days ago, a world of prestige, ambition, and carefully maintained appearances. Marcus stood behind his desk, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Hartley? The risks you've exposed this hospital to?" Alexander met his gaze steadily. "I saved a child's life, Marcus, a child who had been abandoned by the system, by society, by all of us. You performed an unauthorized surgery on an undocumented patient," Marcus exploded. "You brought street children into our hospital without any paperwork, any guardian consent. Do you have any idea of the legal implications?" "I made a medical decision based on what?" Marcus cut him off. "A whim? Some misplaced sense of heroism? This isn't like you, Alexander. You've always understood how things work, the delicate balance we maintain." Alexander leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Maybe that's the problem, Marcus. Maybe I've understood it for too long. Played by rules that prioritize our reputation, our success rates over actual lives." Marcus sank into his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This isn't just about you anymore, Alexander. The board is in an uproar. There's talk of an ethics investigation, possibly even involving the medical board." A chill ran down Alexander's spine. He had known there would be consequences, but the reality of it was still sobering. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying that your actions have put us all in a very difficult position. We need to contain this situation before it spirals out of control." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Tell me about these children. Where did they come from? Do they have any family?" Alexander hesitated. He thought of Lily's fierce protectiveness, of Max's fear of being separated from his sister. "They're orphans," he said carefully. "They've been living on the streets. I don't know all the details yet, but it's clear they have no one else." Marcus leaned back, a calculating look in his eyes. "This could actually work in our favor. Orphaned children, a heroic doctor going above and beyond. If we spin this right, it could be a PR goldmine." The suggestion turned Alexander's stomach. "They're not a story to be spun, Marcus. They're real children who need our help. And we'll help them," Marcus said smoothly. "But we need to be smart about this. I can smooth things over with the board, maybe even turn this into a positive for the hospital. But you need to play ball, Alexander. No more lone wolf actions. Everything goes through proper channels from now on." Alexander stood up, his decision made. "I appreciate your offer, Marcus, but I can't agree to that. These kids trust me. I made them a promise, and I intend to keep it." "Don't be a fool, Hartley," Marcus snapped. "I'm offering you a lifeline here. Without the hospital's support, you'll be facing this storm alone. Your career, everything you've worked for, it could all disappear." For a moment, Alexander felt the weight of that threat. He thought of his penthouse apartment, his speaking engagements, the respect he'd earned in the medical community. But then he remembered the look in Lily's eyes when he promised to keep her and Max together, the feel of Max's fragile heart beneath his hands during surgery. "Maybe it's time for things to change," he said quietly. "I became a doctor to save lives, Marcus. Somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. But these kids, they've reminded me of what really matters." Marcus's face hardened. "I hope you understand what you're doing, Alexander. There's no going back from this." "I understand perfectly," Alexander replied, turning to leave. "And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction." As he walked out of the office, Alexander felt a curious mix of terror and exhilaration. He had just thrown away the safety net that had defined his life for so long. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges he could barely imagine. But there was also a sense of liberation, of stepping into a role he was always meant to play. His first stop was the ICU where Max was recovering. The boy was still unconscious, his small body dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding him. But his vital signs were strong, his newly repaired heart beating with a steady rhythm that brought a smile to Alexander's face. Lily was curled up in a chair beside the bed, her sketchpad open on her lap. She looked up as Alexander entered, her eyes questioning. "How is he?" she asked, her voice small and tired. Alexander checked Max's charts, then gave Lily a reassuring smile. "He's doing very well. Your brother is a fighter, Lily. He's going to pull through this." Lily nodded, then hesitated. "Dr. Hartley, are we in trouble? I heard the nurses talking. They said you might lose your job because of us." Alexander knelt beside her chair, meeting her eyes. "Listen to me, Lily. You and Max are not in trouble, and you don't need to worry about me. I made a choice to help you, and I don't regret it for a second." "But what's going to happen to us?" Lily pressed. "When Max gets better, where will we go?" It was the question Alexander had been grappling with since he first brought them to the hospital. He knew he couldn't in good conscience send them back to the streets, but the complexities of their situation were daunting. "I don't have all the answers yet," he admitted, "but I promise you we'll figure it out together. For now, you both need to focus on getting Max healthy and strong. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded solemnly. Then, to Alexander's surprise, she tore a page from her sketchpad and held it out to him. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Alexander took the drawing, his breath catching in his throat. It showed 3 birds in flight, one large and 2 small, soaring over a cityscape that was half in shadow, half in bright sunlight. The symbolism was clear, and it touched something deep within him. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly. "This is beautiful." As he left the ICU, carefully folding Lily's drawing and tucking it into his pocket, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead were formidable, but he was no longer alone in facing them. He had 2 young lives depending on him now, 2 hearts that had somehow become entwined with his own. The wooden bird figurine on his office desk flashed through his mind once again. It was no longer just a reminder of his past, but a symbol of the future he was choosing to embrace. Whatever storms lay ahead, Alexander Hartley was ready to weather them, his wings spread wide, soaring towards a horizon bright with possibility. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Dr. Alexander Hartley. As Max's condition steadily improved in the ICU, Alexander found himself navigating a complex web of hospital politics, legal considerations, and the growing emotional attachment he felt towards the 2 orphaned siblings. Every spare moment was spent either at Max's bedside, conferring with his medical team, or in hushed conversations with hospital administrators and legal counsel. The story of the street children and the maverick doctor who saved them had begun to spread, drawing attention from both within and outside the hospital walls. It was during one of these moments, as Alexander was explaining a new treatment protocol to Lily, that Nurse Chen interrupted them. "Dr. Hartley," she said, her voice tense. "There's someone here to see you, from Child Protective Services." Alexander felt his heart sink. He had known this moment would come, but he had hoped for more time. He squeezed Lily's shoulder reassuringly. "Stay with your brother. I'll be back soon." In the hospital's administrative wing, Alexander found a stern-faced woman waiting for him. She introduced herself as Margaret Dawson, a senior caseworker with CPS. "Dr. Hartley," she began, her tone businesslike, "I understand you've taken on quite an unusual case here. 2 undocumented minors, one with severe medical needs. Can you walk me through exactly what happened?" Alexander took a deep breath and recounted the events of the past few days, from his first encounter with Lily to Max's successful surgery. As he spoke, he could see Ms. Dawson's expression shifting from skepticism to grudging respect. "What you did was incredibly risky, Dr. Hartley," she said when he finished. "Admirable, perhaps, but it's put us all in a difficult position. These children need proper guardianship, a stable environment." "I understand that," Alexander replied, leaning forward intently. But separating them now, after everything they've been through, would be traumatic. They need stability, yes, but they also need each other. Ms. Dawson's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting you want to take on guardianship yourself, Doctor? Because I must warn you, that would be highly unusual given the circumstances. The question caught Alexander off guard. He hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead, but now that the possibility was laid out before him, he felt a surge of certainty. If that's what it takes to keep them together and give them a chance at a better life, then yes, he said firmly, I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. Ms. Dawson studied him for a long moment, then sighed. It's not that simple, Dr. Hartley. There are procedures, evaluations, home studies. And given the unorthodox way you became involved with these children, there would be additional scrutiny. I understand, Alexander nodded, and I'm prepared to face whatever scrutiny is necessary. These kids have been failed by the system their entire lives. I won't let that happen again. As they continued to discuss the complexities of the situation, Alexander felt a growing resolve. He knew the path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was fighting for something truly meaningful. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Alexander stepped out to find Lily, her face streaked with tears, being gently restrained by Nurse Chen. Dr. Hartley, Lily cried out when she saw him. Please, you have to come quickly. It's Max. Without a word to Ms. Dawson, Alexander took off running towards the ICU, his heart pounding. He burst into Max's room to find a team of nurses surrounding the boy's bed. Max was awake, his eyes wide with panic, his breathing labored. What happened? Alexander demanded, quickly assessing the monitors. His heart rate suddenly spiked, one of the nurses reported. We think he might be having a panic attack. Alexander moved to Max's side, taking the boy's hand in his own. Max, it's Dr. Hartley. Can you hear me? I need you to try and calm down. Take slow, deep breaths with me, okay? As he guided Max through breathing exercises, Alexander noticed the boy's eyes darting around the room, searching. Lily? Max gasped. Where's Lily? Understanding dawned on Alexander. He turned to Nurse Chen. Bring Lily in here now. Moments later, Lily rushed to her brother's side. As soon as Max saw her, his breathing began to even out, his heart rate slowly returning to normal. I'm here, Max, Lily said softly, squeezing her brother's hand. Everything's okay. Dr. Hartley fixed your heart, remember? Alexander watched the interaction with a mixture of relief and amazement. The bond between these siblings was powerful, their need for each other palpable. He thought of his own childhood, of the support and love his parents had given him, and felt a renewed determination to fight for these children. As the crisis passed and Max drifted back to sleep, Alexander noticed Ms. Dawson standing in the doorway. She had witnessed the entire scene, and there was a new thoughtfulness in her expression. I see what you mean about keeping them together, she said quietly as Alexander joined her in the hallway. Their connection is remarkable. Alexander nodded. They've only had each other for so long. Separating them now would do more harm than good. Ms. Dawson sighed, rubbing her temples. This is an incredibly complex situation, Dr. Hartley. I can't make any promises, but I'll do what I can to keep their case together. In the meantime, we'll need to find a temporary guardian for them both. I volunteer, Alexander said without hesitation, at least until we can figure out a more permanent solution. Ms. Dawson raised an eyebrow. You're sure about this? It's a huge responsibility, especially given your professional obligations. Alexander thought of the wooden bird figurine on his desk, of his parents who had taught him the value of compassion and courage. He thought of the emptiness that had plagued him for so long, and the sense of purpose he'd found in caring for Max and Lily. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he said firmly. As Ms. Dawson left to begin the necessary paperwork, Alexander returned to Max's room. Lily had fallen asleep in the chair beside her brother's bed, her hand still clasping his. The sight filled Alexander with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He gently draped a blanket over Lily's shoulders, then sat down on Max's other side. As he settled in for the night, prepared to watch over both children, Alexander felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with legal hurdles and personal sacrifices, But looking at the sleeping faces of Max and Lily, he knew with absolute certainty that it was a road worth taking. The wooden bird figurine seemed to soar through his mind, no longer a solitary figure but part of a flock. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, their wings spread wide, ready for whatever winds might come. The soft beeping of medical equipment provided a steady rhythm to the quiet of Max's hospital room. Dr. Alexander Hartley sat in his now familiar chair, his eyes moving between the sleeping forms of Max and Lily and the stack of papers in his lap. The documents from Child Protective Services seemed to weigh as much as the responsibility he was undertaking. As he filled out form after form, Alexander couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of changes that had swept through his life in the past week. His perfectly ordered world had been turned upside down, yet he felt more alive than he had in years. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Nurse Chen, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "Dr. Hartley," she said softly, mindful of the sleeping children, "there's something you need to see." Curious, Alexander followed her to the nurse's station. Chen handed him a tablet, open to a local news website. The headline made his heart skip a beat. "Maverick Doctor Risks Career to Save Orphaned Siblings." As he skimmed the article, Alexander felt a growing sense of unease. While the tone was largely positive, painting him as a hero bucking an uncaring system, it also raised questions about hospital protocols and the legal implications of his actions. "It's all over social media too," Chen added. "People are calling you a modern-day Robin Hood of medicine." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Max and Lily don't need this kind of attention." "Maybe not," Chen replied, her voice thoughtful. "But maybe this is bigger than just them now. Look at the comments, Dr. Hartley." Scrolling through the comments section, Alexander was struck by the outpouring of support. People were sharing their own stories of struggling with the healthcare system, of children falling through the cracks. Many were calling for changes in how hospitals and social services handled cases like Max and Lily's. "You've struck a chord," Chen said softly. "People are hungry for a reminder that there's still compassion in the world." Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus Reeves. "My office now." With a sense of foreboding, Alexander made his way to the administrative wing. He found Marcus pacing behind his desk, his face thunderous. "Have you seen this?" Marcus demanded, gesturing to the news article displayed on his computer screen. Alexander nodded. "Just now." "Marcus, I swear I didn't." "Save it," Marcus cut him off. "The board is in an uproar. We've got reporters camped outside the hospital, and our legal team is working overtime to manage this PR nightmare." "Nightmare?" Alexander repeated, his temper flaring. "We saved a child's life, Marcus. We're giving 2 orphaned kids a chance at a future. How is that a nightmare?" Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "Because it sets a dangerous precedent, Hartley. We can't have doctors going rogue, ignoring protocols whenever they feel like playing hero. Do you have any idea of the liability issues we're facing?" As the 2 men stared each other down, the tension palpable, there was another knock at the door. It was Ms. Dawson from CPS, her expression grave. "Gentlemen," she said, stepping into the office, "I hope I'm not interrupting, but we have a situation developing." Alexander felt his heart sink. "What kind of situation?" Ms. Dawson took a deep breath. "We've been contacted by a couple claiming to be Max and Lily's aunt and uncle. They say they've been searching for the children for years and want to take custody." The news hit Alexander like a physical blow. "That's impossible," he said, his voice hoarse. "Lily told me they had no family left." "They might not have known," Ms. Dawson replied, "or they might have had reasons for hiding the truth. Either way, we're legally obligated to investigate the claim." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a calculating look in his eyes. "This could be the solution to our problem. If the children have family willing to take them in, our involvement ends. The story goes away." Alexander felt a surge of protective anger. "These aren't just some problem to be solved, Marcus. They're children who've been through trauma. We can't just hand them over to strangers claiming to be family without thorough investigation." Ms. Dawson nodded. "Dr. Hartley is right. We'll need to verify the claim and ensure that any placement is in the best interest of the children. In the meantime, given the media attention, we'll need to move Max and Lily to a secure location once Max is cleared for release." The implications of her words sank in. Alexander realized he might be separated from the children sooner than he'd anticipated. The thought sent a pang through his heart. "I want to be involved in the verification process," he said firmly. "And I want to be there when you talk to Max and Lily about this. They trust me." Ms. Dawson studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Dr. Hartley. But remember, our priority has to be what's best for the children, not what feels best for us." As Alexander left the office, his mind reeling from this new development, he nearly collided with Lily in the hallway. She was out of breath, her eyes wide with panic. "Dr. Hartley, I've been looking everywhere for you," she gasped. "It's Max. He woke up and saw the news on TV. He's really upset. He thinks they're going to take us away." Without a word, Alexander took Lily's hand and hurried towards Max's room. As they walked, he felt the weight of the challenges ahead pressing down on him. The situation was growing more complex by the hour, with forces beyond his control threatening to unravel everything. But looking down at Lily's trusting face, feeling the warmth of her small hand in his, Alexander knew he couldn't give up. Whatever storms lay ahead, he would face them. For Max and Lily, for the promise he'd made, and for the man he was becoming. A man who finally understood the true meaning of healing. As they reached Max's room, Alexander took a deep breath, steeling himself for the difficult conversation ahead. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The ripples of change he'd set in motion were only beginning to spread. Dr. Alexander Hartley pushed open the door to Max's room, his heart heavy with the weight of the conversation to come. The sight that greeted him only intensified his resolve. Max was sitting up in bed, his young face etched with fear and confusion, while a nurse tried unsuccessfully to calm him down. "It's okay. I've got this," Alexander said to the nurse, who nodded gratefully and left the room. "Dr. Hartley," Max cried, his voice trembling. "They're going to take us away, aren't they? I saw it on the TV. They're calling us orphans and saying we don't belong here." Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, placing a comforting hand on Max's shoulder. Lily climbed up next to her brother, their hands instinctively finding each other. "Listen to me, both of you," Alexander said, his voice gentle but firm. "What you saw on TV, it's complicated. But I promise you, I'm not going to let anyone take you away without making absolutely sure it's the right thing for you." Max's lower lip trembled. "But we don't have anywhere else to go. You said you'd help us stay together." Alexander took a deep breath, knowing he had to tread carefully. "And I meant that. But there's something we need to talk about. Something important has come up." Over the next few minutes, Alexander carefully explained about the couple claiming to be their aunt and uncle. He watched as a myriad of emotions played across the children's faces, surprise, confusion, and a flicker of something else that he couldn't quite place. "We don't have an aunt and uncle," Lily said firmly, but Alexander noticed a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Are you sure?" he pressed gently. "It's okay if you're not certain. Sometimes families can be complicated." Max and Lily exchanged a look, seeming to have a silent conversation. Finally, Max spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was someone, a long time ago, before." He trailed off, his eyes growing distant. Lily squeezed her brother's hand. "It's okay, Max, you can tell Dr. Hartley." Max took a shaky breath. "Before our mom, before she left us, she used to talk about her sister sometimes, but she always said we could never contact her, that it wasn't safe." Alexander leaned in, his curiosity piqued. "Not safe? Did your mom ever explain why?" Lily shook her head. "She never told us details, just that her sister had married a bad man and that we had to stay away. After Mom left, we tried not to think about it." The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they only led to more questions. Alexander's mind raced with the implications. If these people really were Max and Lily's aunt and uncle, what had happened in the past to cause such a rift? And more importantly, was it truly safe for the children to be placed with them now? "Thank you for telling me this," Alexander said softly. "I know it must be difficult to talk about. I promise you, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And no matter what happens, I'll be here for you both." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ms. Dawson entered, her face serious. "Dr. Hartley, may I speak with you outside for a moment?" Alexander nodded, then turned back to Max and Lily. "I'll be right back. Try not to worry, okay?" In the hallway, Ms. Dawson's expression was grim. "We've done some preliminary checking on the couple claiming to be the children's aunt and uncle. Their story seems to check out on the surface, but there are some red flags." "What kind of red flags?" Alexander asked, his protective instincts flaring. "The uncle has a record. Nothing recent, but there were some domestic disturbance calls years ago, and their financial situation is questionable. They've moved around a lot in the past few years." Alexander's mind flashed to Max's words about his mother's warnings. "The children just told me something. Their mother had warned them about her sister marrying a bad man, said it wasn't safe to contact them." Ms. Dawson's eyes widened. "That certainly adds another layer to this. We'll need to investigate further before we can even consider placement." As they continued to discuss the situation, neither of them noticed Nurse Chen approaching until she was right beside them, her face pale. "Dr. Hartley, Ms. Dawson, I think you need to see this," she said, holding out a tablet. On the screen was a news article, the headline blaring, "Mystery Deepens, Mother of Orphaned Siblings Spotted in Chicago." Alexander felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He scanned the article quickly, his heart racing. According to the report, a woman matching the description of Max and Lily's mother had been seen in a homeless shelter on the outskirts of the city. "This changes everything," Ms. Dawson breathed. Alexander's mind was already racing ahead. If the children's mother was alive, why had she abandoned them? Was she in some kind of trouble? And how did this connect to the mysterious aunt and uncle who had suddenly appeared? He turned back towards Max's room, knowing he had to tell the children about this latest development. But as he reached for the door handle, he hesitated. How much more upheaval could these young hearts take? In that moment of doubt, Alexander's gaze fell on his reflection in the glass panel of the door. He barely recognized the man staring back at him, tired, disheveled, but with a fire in his eyes that had been missing for far too long. He thought of the wooden bird figurine on his desk, a symbol of his own journey and the unexpected path that had led him here. He thought of his parents, who had taught him that true healing went beyond the physical, touching the very soul. Taking a deep breath, Alexander squared his shoulders and pushed open the door. Whatever twists and turns lay ahead in this increasingly complex story, he knew one thing for certain. He would stand by Max and Lily, helping them navigate the turbulent waters until they found safe harbor. As he stepped into the room, met by the expectant faces of the two children who had so unexpectedly become the center of his world, Alexander felt a sense of purpose, stronger than any he had known before. The truth, whatever it might be, was out there, and together they would unravel its threads no matter where they might lead. Dr. Alexander Hartley stood at the threshold of Max's hospital room, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The news of their mother's possible reappearance burned in his mind, a truth that could shatter the fragile trust he had built with Max and Lily. As he pushed the door open, their expectant faces turned to him, hope and fear mingling in their eyes. "What's wrong, Dr. Hartley?" Lily asked, her perceptive gaze catching the tension in his posture. Alexander took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. He pulled up a chair, sitting so he could look both children in the eye. "Max, Lily, there's something important we need to talk about. It's about your mother." The effect was immediate. Max's hand tightened around Lily's, while Lily's eyes widened with a mix of emotions, hope, fear, and something that looked almost like guilt. "What about her?" Max asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexander chose his words carefully. "There's been a report that someone who looks like your mother was seen in Chicago. We don't know for sure if it's her, but we're going to investigate." The silence that followed was deafening. Max's face crumpled, tears welling in his eyes, while Lily's expression became unreadable, her gaze fixed on some distant point. She left us," Max finally choked out. "Why would she come back now?" Alexander's heart ached for the pain in the boy's voice. He reached out, placing a comforting hand on Max's shoulder. "I don't know, Max, but I promise you, we're going to find out. Whatever happens, I'm here for both of you." Lily's voice, when she finally spoke, was so soft, Alexander almost missed it. "It's my fault." Both Alexander and Max turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean, Lily?" Alexander asked gently. Lily's lower lip trembled, but her voice grew stronger. "The night before Mom left, I heard her on the phone. She was crying, saying she had to do something to protect us. I should have told someone, should have stopped her, but I was scared." Max stared at his sister in disbelief. "You never told me that." "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, tears now flowing freely. I thought if I pretended it never happened, maybe she'd come back." Alexander's mind raced with this new information. What had driven their mother to abandon her children? What threat had she been trying to protect them from? "Lily," he said softly, "you have nothing to be sorry for. You were just a child trying to cope with a very difficult situation, but this information might be very helpful. Can you remember anything else about that phone call?" Lily furrowed her brow in concentration. "She mentioned a name. I think it was Uncle Jack. She said he had found us, and she had to lead him away." The pieces were starting to fall into place. Uncle Jack. Could this be the bad man their mother had warned them about, the one married to their aunt? Before Alexander could pursue this line of questioning further, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices and hurried footsteps approached the room. The door burst open, revealing Ms. Dawson, her face flushed with urgency. "Dr. Hartley, we need to move the children now." Alexander stood instantly alert. "What's happening?" Ms. Dawson's eyes darted to Max and Lily, then back to Alexander. "The couple claiming to be their aunt and uncle are here. They're demanding to see the children, and they've brought a lawyer." A chill ran down Alexander's spine. He turned to Max and Lily, seeing the fear etched on their young faces. "It's going to be okay," he assured them, praying he could keep that promise. "We're going to keep you safe." As they hurriedly prepared to move Max, mindful of his still healing heart, Alexander's mind whirled with the implications of these new developments. The reappearance of the children's mother, the arrival of the mysterious aunt and uncle, it couldn't be a coincidence. In the chaos of the moment, as nurses disconnected monitors and Ms. Dawson coordinated with hospital security, Alexander caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Through the window of Max's room, in the parking lot below, he saw a man standing next to a dark sedan, his gaze fixed intently on the hospital entrance. There was something in the man's posture, a coiled tension that set off every alarm in Alexander's mind. As they wheeled Max's bed out of the room, Lily clinging to her brother's hand, Alexander made a split-second decision. He pulled Ms. Dawson aside. "We can't take them out the main entrance," he said urgently. "I think someone's watching the hospital. We need another way out." Ms. Dawson's eyes widened, but she nodded briskly. "There's a service elevator that leads to the underground parking. We can use that." As they changed course, heading for the service areas of the hospital, Alexander felt a surge of protectiveness unlike anything he'd experienced before. He had started this journey thinking he was simply saving a child's life. Now, he realized, he was fighting for something much bigger, for justice, for family, for the chance to right wrongs that had echoed through years of pain and separation. The wooden bird figurine on his desk seemed to flash through his mind, no longer a simple memento but a talisman of hope and perseverance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets still lurked in the shadows of Max and Lily's past, Alexander knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not rest until these children were safe, their family whole once more. As the service elevator doors closed behind them, sealing them off from the world above, Alexander took a deep breath. The next chapter of this unexpected journey was about to begin, and he was ready to face whatever it might bring. The underground parking garage was a maze of concrete pillars and flickering fluorescent lights. Dr. Alexander Hartley pushed Max's wheelchair, with Lily walking close beside them, her small hand clutching the edge of her brother's blanket. Ms. Dawson led the way, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm that echoed in the cavernous space. "My car's just ahead," Ms. Dawson whispered, her eyes darting around nervously. Once we're in, I'll take you to a safe house. We can figure out our next move from there." Alexander nodded, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat, every distant sound a cause for alarm. He couldn't shake the image of the man he'd seen watching the hospital entrance. Who was he? Was he connected to the mysterious Uncle Jack that Lily had mentioned? They had almost reached Ms. Dawson's car when a voice rang out, freezing them in their tracks. "Hold it right there." Alexander whirled around, instinctively placing himself between the children and the source of the voice. A man and woman were approaching rapidly, their faces a mixture of anger and desperation. "That's them," Ms. Dawson hissed, "the couple claiming to be their aunt and uncle." The man, tall and broad-shouldered with a face weathered by hard living, pointed an accusing finger at Alexander. "You had no right to hide these children from us. They're our family." Alexander felt Max trembling behind him, heard Lily's sharp intake of breath. He stood his ground, his voice steady. "I'm Dr. Alexander Hartley. I've been caring for Max and Lily, and I'm not hiding them from anyone. I'm protecting them until we can verify your claims and ensure their safety." The woman stepped forward, her eyes locked on the children. She was younger than her husband, with a fragile beauty that spoke of a hard life. "Max, Lily, don't you remember us? I'm your Aunt Sarah. This is your Uncle Jack." At the mention of Uncle Jack's name, Lily let out a small gasp. Alexander felt her press closer to him, as if seeking protection. "Please," Sarah continued, her voice breaking, "we've been searching for you for so long. We just want to take you home, to give you the family you deserve." Alexander could feel the tension radiating from the children. He was about to respond when another voice cut through the air, sending a shockwave through the group. "Get away from my children!" All heads turned to see a woman emerging from behind a nearby pillar. She was thin to the point of gauntness, her clothes shabby and her hair unkempt. But there was no mistaking the fierce love and determination in her eyes as she looked at Max and Lily. "Mom?" Max's voice was barely a whisper, filled with disbelief and a fragile hope. The woman, their mother, took a step forward, then faltered, her eyes filling with tears. "Max, Lily, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave you, but I had to keep you safe." Uncle Jack's face contorted with rage. "You!" he spat. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up now, after what you did." "After what I did?" Their mother's voice rose, years of pain and anger bubbling to the surface. "You're the one who threatened my children, who said you'd take them away if I didn't—" "Enough!" Alexander's voice cut through the chaos. He looked at Ms. Dawson, seeing his own confusion and concern mirrored in her eyes. "Clearly there's a lot more going on here than we realized. But this is neither the time nor the place to hash it out. These children have been through enough trauma." He turned to the mother, his voice gentler. "Ma'am, I understand you want to be with your children, but we need to make sure everyone is safe and that we're following proper procedures. Will you come with us to someplace secure where we can talk this through?" The mother hesitated, her eyes darting between her children and the angry faces of Sarah and Jack. Finally, she nodded. "Anything for my kids." Uncle Jack took a menacing step forward. "You're not taking them anywhere. We have rights." Alexander stood firm, drawing himself up to his full height. "What we have right now is a complex situation that needs to be handled carefully and legally. Ms. Dawson here is from Child Protective Services. She'll ensure that everyone's rights are respected, including and especially those of Max and Lily." He locked eyes with Jack, his voice low and intense. "But let me be very clear. My primary concern is the well-being of these children, and I will do whatever it takes to keep them safe." For a tense moment it seemed like Jack might lash out, but then Sarah placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering something in his ear. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind a man who suddenly looked old and defeated. "Fine," Jack growled, "but this isn't over." As Sarah and Jack retreated, Alexander turned his attention back to Max and Lily. The children were staring at their mother, a whirlwind of emotions playing across their faces. Joy, confusion, hurt, longing. "Mom," Lily whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. "Is it really you?" Their mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It's me, baby. I'm here now, and I promise I'll never leave you again." The reunion that followed was both heart-wrenching and beautiful. Alexander watched as the small family clung to each other, years of separation and pain giving way to the healing power of love. But even as he smiled at the scene, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were still so many unanswered questions, so many potential dangers lurking in the shadows. As they made their way to Ms. Dawson's car, the family reunited but the future still uncertain. Alexander found himself thinking once again of the wooden bird figurine on his desk. It had started as a simple reminder of his past, but now it seemed to represent something more. The fragile beauty of hope, the strength found in facing adversity together, the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Alexander knew he would face them alongside Max, Lily, and their mother. The journey that had begun with a desperate plea in a hospital corridor had become something far greater, a chance to redefine the very meaning of family, healing, and home. As they drove away from the hospital, leaving behind the shadows of the past and heading towards an uncertain but hopeful future, Alexander felt a sense of purpose, stronger than any he had known before. The road ahead might be difficult, but with compassion as his guide and determination as his fuel, he was ready to see this journey through to its end. The safe house was a modest two-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, its unremarkable facade belying the emotional turmoil unfolding within. Dr. Alexander Hartley stood by the living room window, his eyes scanning the street outside for any sign of threat. Behind him, the reunion between Max, Lily, and their mother, Amanda, continued in a mixture of tears, hugs, and tentative smiles. Ms. Dawson sat in an armchair, her notepad at the ready, watching the scene with a mixture of professional detachment and genuine empathy. As the initial wave of emotion began to subside, she cleared her throat gently. "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But we need to understand exactly what happened, for the children's safety, and to determine the best path forward." Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes. She pulled Max and Lily close, one on each side of her on the worn sofa. "Where do I even begin?" she whispered. Alexander turned from the window, moving to sit across from the small family. "Maybe start with the night you left," he suggested gently. Lily mentioned overhearing a phone call. Amanda's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with guilt as she looked at her daughter. "Oh, sweetheart, I never meant for you to hear that. I'm so sorry." Lily shrugged, trying to appear brave despite the tremble in her voice. "It's okay, Mom. I just want to understand." Taking a deep breath, Amanda began her story. "It all started years ago, with my sister Sarah. We were close once, but then she met Jack. He seemed charming at first, but there was always something off about him. When Sarah married him, things changed. She became distant, afraid." Alexander leaned forward, his mind racing. "Jack, the man claiming to be their uncle." Amanda nodded, her face darkening. "He's not their uncle by blood, thank God. But yes, that's him. A few years after Sarah married him, I started to suspect he was involved in some illegal activities. Nothing I could prove, but there were signs. Mysterious phone calls, sudden influxes of cash, shady characters coming around." "What kind of illegal activities?" Ms. Dawson asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Amanda shook her head. "I was never sure of the details, but I think it had something to do with smuggling. Art, maybe, or antiquities. Whatever it was big enough that Jack was always paranoid about being watched or caught." She paused, pulling Max and Lily closer. "Then about a year before I left, Sarah showed up at our door in the middle of the night. She was terrified, babbling about how Jack had gone too far, how he'd done something terrible. She begged me to help her disappear." "Did you?" Alexander asked softly. Amanda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I helped her get a new identity, set her up in a town a few states away. I thought that was the end of it. But then Jack started showing up, asking questions. He was convinced I knew where Sarah was, that I was hiding something from him." Her voice broke as she continued. "The night I left, Jack had called. He was drunk, angry. He said he knew I'd helped Sarah, and that if I didn't tell him where she was, he'd take the kids, use them as leverage. I couldn't let that happen. So I ran, thinking if I disappeared too, he'd follow me and leave Max and Lily alone. The room fell silent as the weight of Amanda's words sank in. Alexander felt a mixture of anger and admiration. Anger at the circumstances that had torn this family apart, and admiration for the lengths Amanda had gone to protect her children. Max was the first to speak, his voice small and confused. "But why didn't you come back, Mum? Why did you stay away so long?" Amanda's face crumpled with guilt and sorrow. "Oh, baby, I wanted to, every single day, but I was scared. Scared that if I came back, Jack would find us all. And then, as time passed, I convinced myself that maybe you were better off without me, that someone else could give you the stable life you deserved." Lily's voice was fierce as she gripped her mother's hand. "We were never better off without you, Mom, never." As Alexander watched the family cling to each other, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mystery was unraveling, but the danger was far from over. Jack was still out there, potentially still a threat, and there were legal hurdles to overcome: Amanda's abandonment, the children's time on the streets, the complex custody situation. He caught Ms. Dawson's eye, seeing his own determination reflected there. They had a long road ahead, but the truth was finally coming to light. It was a start, a foundation on which to build a brighter future for this fractured family. "Amanda," Alexander said gently, "thank you for sharing this with us. I know it wasn't easy, but understanding what happened is the first step in making things right." Amanda looked up at him, gratitude shining in her tear-filled eyes. "Thank you, Dr. Hartley, for everything you've done for my children. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Alexander shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Seeing this family reunited is all the repayment I need. But our work isn't done yet. We need to make sure you're all safe, legally and physically." Ms. Dawson nodded, her professional demeanor tempered with compassion. "Dr. Hartley is right. We'll need to involve the authorities, find a way to protect you from Jack while also addressing the legal issues surrounding the children's care." As they began to discuss the next steps, Alexander felt a tugging on his sleeve. He looked down to see Lily holding out a piece of paper, another of her drawings. This one showed a group of birds, no longer just in pairs but in a larger flock, flying together through a sky filled with both storm clouds and patches of sunlight. "It's all of us," Lily explained softly. "Flying together, no matter what." Alexander felt a lump form in his throat as he accepted the drawing. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that his journey with this family was far from over. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a flock united, soaring towards a future bright with possibility. As the discussion continued late into the night, plans being made and strategies formed, Alexander found himself thinking once again of the wooden bird figurine on his office desk. It was no longer just a reminder of his past, but a symbol of the future he was helping to build. A future where healing went beyond the physical, touching hearts and reuniting families torn apart by fear and circumstance. The road ahead would be difficult, but looking at the hope shining in the eyes of Max, Lily, and Amanda, Alexander knew it was a road worth taking. Together, they would write a new chapter, one of redemption, reunion, and the enduring power of love to overcome even the darkest of pasts. The days following the revelations at the safe house were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Alexander Hartley found himself at the center of a complex web of legal proceedings, protective measures, and emotional healing. The comfortable routine of his former life seemed like a distant memory as he navigated this new reality with Max, Lily, and Amanda. Early one morning, Alexander stood in his office at the hospital, packing up the last of his personal belongings. He had taken an extended leave of absence to focus on the case, a decision that had raised eyebrows among his colleagues, but felt undeniably right. As he carefully wrapped the wooden bird figurine that had started it all, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, surprised to see Dr. Marcus Reeves enter, his face a mask of professional neutrality. "Hartley," Marcus nodded, his eyes taking in the half-empty office. "So you're really going through with this?" Alexander straightened, meeting his colleague's gaze. "I am. These kids need me, Marcus. And to be honest, I think I need them too. This case, it's reminded me of why I became a doctor in the first place." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I won't pretend to understand it, but I can see this means a lot to you. The board has agreed to your leave of absence, but they want you to know the door is open for your return. You're a damn good surgeon, Hartley, despite our differences." The unexpected support caught Alexander off guard. He offered Marcus a genuine smile. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As Marcus left, Alexander felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been so focused on the challenges ahead that he'd almost forgotten the life he was leaving behind. But now, looking at his packed belongings, he realized this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. Across town, in a modest apartment that had become their temporary home, Amanda sat with Max and Lily, helping them prepare for the day ahead. It was to be their first meeting with the prosecutor assigned to build a case against Jack, and tension hung heavy in the air. "Do we really have to do this, Mom?" Max asked, his voice small and uncertain. "Can't we just forget about Uncle Jack and move on?" Amanda knelt in front of her son, gently smoothing his hair. "I wish we could, sweetheart. But what Jack did, threatening our family, forcing us apart, it was wrong. And sometimes to make things right, we have to be brave and tell our story." Lily, who had been quietly sketching in the corner, looked up. "Will Dr. Hartley be there with us?" "Of course I will," came Alexander's voice from the doorway. He entered the apartment, his arms full of paper bags. "And I brought breakfast. Can't face a big day on an empty stomach, right?" As they ate together, Alexander marveled at how natural it felt, how quickly this small family had become such an integral part of his life. The children's resilience never ceased to amaze him, and Amanda's strength in the face of adversity was truly inspiring. After breakfast, as they prepared to leave for the prosecutor's office, Lily tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Dr. Hartley, I made something for you." She held out a small, crudely folded paper crane. "It's for luck, and to say thank you for being our guardian angel." Alexander felt a lump form in his throat as he carefully took the delicate creation. "Thank you, Lily. This means the world to me, and you know what? You're my guardian angels too, all of you. You've given me a purpose I didn't even know I was missing." The meeting with the prosecutor was long and emotionally draining. Alexander sat beside Amanda as she recounted the years of fear and separation, providing silent support when her voice faltered. Max and Lily, brave beyond their years, shared their experiences of life on the streets, of the hardship they'd endured. As difficult as it was, Alexander could see the cathartic effect the process was having on the family. With each retelling, the shadows of the past seemed to lose some of their power, replaced by a growing determination to build a better future. After the meeting, exhausted but relieved, they decided to take a detour on their way home. Alexander drove them to a small park on the outskirts of the city, a peaceful oasis of green amidst the urban sprawl. As Max and Lily ran to the playground, their laughter a balm to the heavy emotions of the day, Alexander and Amanda sat on a nearby bench. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. Amanda sighed, her gaze fixed on her playing children. "It's hard, reliving it all, but also liberating in a way. For so long I've been carrying this weight, this fear, sharing it, knowing that something's being done, it helps." Alexander nodded, understanding all too well the power of unburdening one's soul. "You're incredibly strong, Amanda. What you did to protect your children, it's remarkable." She turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Alexander. You didn't just save Max's life with that surgery. You saved all of us. You gave us a chance at being a family again." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Alexander watched Max and Lily chasing each other around the playground, their peals of laughter carried on the evening breeze. Amanda sat beside him, a contented smile on her face as she watched her children play. In that moment, Alexander felt a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. The journey ahead was still uncertain, with legal battles to fight and wounds to heal. But looking at this small family that had unexpectedly become his own, he knew that together they could face anything. He reached into his pocket, feeling the smooth wood of the bird figurine his father had carved so long ago. It was no longer just a reminder of his past, but a symbol of the future he was helping to build. A future where healing went beyond the physical, touching hearts and reuniting families torn apart by fear and circumstance. As Max and Lily ran back to them, faces flushed with exertion and joy, Alexander made a silent promise. He would be there for this family, through whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would spread their wings and soar, leaving behind the shadows of the past and flying towards a future bright with hope and possibility. The wooden bird figurine seemed to pulse with warmth in his pocket, a talisman of the incredible journey that had brought them all together. And as the family walked hand in hand back to the car, ready to face whatever came next, Alexander knew that he had found something he never even knew he was looking for: a sense of purpose, of family, and of home. The courtroom was hushed as Amanda took the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she was sworn in. Dr. Alexander Hartley sat in the gallery, Max and Lily on either side of him, their small hands gripping his tightly. The trial against Jack had finally begun, and the tension in the air was palpable. As Amanda began to recount her story, her voice grew stronger with each word. She spoke of the years of fear, of the impossible choice she'd faced, and of the heartbreak of leaving her children behind. Alexander watched the jury's faces, seeing shock, sympathy, and anger flicker across them as the full extent of Jack's actions came to light. Across the aisle, Jack sat with his defense attorney, his face a mask of indifference. But Alexander, watching closely, saw the man's jaw clench and his eyes narrow as Amanda's testimony painted a damning picture of his character and actions. When it was Jack's turn to take the stand, his demeanor changed. Gone was the intimidating figure from the parking garage. In his place was a man who portrayed himself as misunderstood, claiming he had only been trying to reunite a broken family. His performance was smooth, rehearsed, and Alexander felt a knot of worry form in his stomach. During a recess, Alexander found Amanda in the hallway, her face pale and drawn. "You did great up there," he reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Amanda managed a weak smile. "I just hope it's enough. Jack, he's always been good at manipulating people. What if the jury believes him?" Before Alexander could respond, Max and Lily appeared at their side, having slipped away from the social worker who was watching them. "Mom," Lily said, her voice filled with a maturity beyond her years, "we believe in you, and so does Dr. Hartley. We're all in this together, remember?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her children close. Alexander watched the small family embrace, feeling once again the powerful bond that had formed between all of them. Whatever the outcome of the trial, he knew they would face it as a unit. As the trial progressed over the next few days, Alexander found himself constantly amazed by the strength and resilience of Max and Lily. Despite the stress of the situation, they seemed to be thriving, their bond with their mother growing stronger each day. He often caught Lily sketching during breaks in the proceedings, her drawings filled with images of birds in flight, soaring over stormy skies towards patches of sunlight. It was during one of these breaks that Alexander received an unexpected call. The name on his phone screen made his heart skip a beat. Dr. Marcus Reeves. "Hartley?" Marcus's voice came through, uncharacteristically hesitant. "How's the trial going?" Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Hey, it's tough, Marcus. Jack's defense is pulling out all the stops, but we're hanging in there." There was a pause, then Marcus spoke again. "Listen, I've been thinking about your situation. The board has been discussing it too. We want to help." Alexander's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Help? How?" "We're prepared to offer resources, legal support, counseling services for the family, whatever you need. And," Marcus hesitated, "we want you to know that your job is secure no matter how long this takes. You're doing important work, Hartley. It's opened our eyes to some gaps in our system, gaps we want to address." Overwhelmed by the unexpected support, Alexander felt a lump form in his throat. "Marcus, thank you. This means more than you know." As he ended the call, Alexander turned to find Lily standing nearby, a knowing smile on her face. "Good news?" she asked. Alexander nodded, marveling once again at the child's perceptiveness. "Very good news. It looks like we've got even more people on our side now." The final day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed as the lawyers delivered their closing arguments. Alexander sat with Amanda, Max, and Lily, his arm protectively around the children as they listened to the prosecution sum up the case against Jack. When the jury filed out to begin deliberations, the wait began. Hours ticked by, feeling like an eternity. Alexander paced the hallway, his mind racing with all the possible outcomes. Amanda sat quietly, her children close by her side, their presence seeming to give her strength. Finally, after what seemed like days, but was in reality only a few hours, the jury returned. As the foreman stood to deliver the verdict, Alexander held his breath, feeling the collective tension in the room. On the charges of extortion, threatening a minor, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping, we find the defendant, Jack Thompson, guilty. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps, cries, and sighs of relief. Alexander felt Max and Lily's arms wrap around him as Amanda broke down in tears of joy and relief. Jack, his face a storm of anger and disbelief, was led away in handcuffs. As they left the courthouse, stepping out into the bright sunlight, Alexander felt as if a great weight had been lifted. The journey wasn't over. There would be sentencing, ongoing therapy, and the long process of healing. But the worst was behind them. Amanda turned to Alexander, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We did it," she said softly. "All of us, together." Alexander nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced in the operating room. "Yes, we did, and we'll keep doing it every step of the way." As they walked towards the car, Lily tugged on Alexander's sleeve. She held out a new drawing, this one showing a flock of birds, no longer fighting against a storm, but soaring freely under a clear, bright sky. "This is us now," she explained, her voice filled with hope. "No more storms, just family." Alexander carefully took the drawing, his heart full to bursting. As he looked at the small family beside him, Amanda, Max, and Lily, he realized that somewhere along this incredible journey, they had become his family too. The wooden bird figurine in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, a reminder of where he'd come from and a symbol of where they were all going, together, as a family, towards a future full of hope, healing, and endless possibilities. The months following Jack's conviction passed in a blur of activity and change. Dr. Alexander Hartley found himself navigating a new reality, one that seamlessly blended his medical expertise with his growing role in the lives of Amanda, Max, and Lily. On a crisp autumn morning, Alexander stood in the driveway of a modest suburban home, a sold sign swaying gently in the breeze. Amanda emerged from the front door, a box in her arms and a smile on her face. "That's the last of it," she announced, placing the box in the back of the moving truck. "I can't believe this is really happening." Alexander helped her close the truck's rear door. "Believe it," he said warmly. "You've all earned this fresh start." The decision to move had been a collective one. The apartment they'd been staying in held too many painful memories, and the children needed a stable environment to truly heal and grow. With the help of the hospital board's resources and Alexander's support, they had found this perfect little house in a quiet neighborhood, complete with a backyard for the kids to play in. As if on cue, Max and Lily came bounding out of the house, their faces alight with excitement. "Dr. Hartley," Max called out, "did you see my room? It has a window seat where I can read." Lily, not to be outdone, added, "And I have a perfect spot for my art desk. I can see the whole backyard from there." Alexander chuckled, his heart warming at their enthusiasm. "It sounds perfect. And remember, you two have a very important job ahead, deciding what color to paint your rooms." As they all piled into Amanda's car to follow the moving truck, Alexander couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd all come. Max's health had improved dramatically, his heart growing stronger every day. Lily's nightmares had become less frequent, replaced by dreams of the future she drew in vibrant colors. And Amanda, the haunted look in her eyes had faded, replaced by a quiet strength and determination. The drive to the new house was filled with chatter and laughter, the kids pointing out landmarks and imagining their new life. Alexander found himself joining in, his own excitement growing with each mile. As they pulled up to their new home, a surprise awaited them. Dr. Marcus Reeves stood on the front porch, a gift basket in his hands and a slightly awkward smile on his face. "Marcus," Alexander said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Marcus stepped forward, extending the basket. "Welcome wagon, courtesy of the hospital staff. We all wanted to do something to celebrate this new chapter." Amanda accepted the basket with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Dr. Reeves. This means so much to us." As they all worked together to unload the truck and settle into the new house, Alexander was struck by the sense of community that had formed around this small family. Hospital staff dropped by throughout the day, bringing food, housewarming gifts, and offers of help. Neighbors introduced themselves, welcoming them warmly to the area. By evening, exhausted but happy, they all sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over their new backyard. Max and Lily were already planning where to put a treehouse, while Amanda leafed through paint swatches, considering colors for the living room. "So, Dr. Hartley," Lily said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "when are you going to move in?" The question caught Alexander off guard. He looked at Amanda, seeing a blush rise to her cheeks. "Lily," Amanda gently admonished, "Dr. Hartley has his own home, and his work at the hospital—" "Actually," Alexander interrupted, surprising himself with his words, "I've been thinking about that. About all of this, really." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "These past months have shown me what's truly important in life. It's not the awards or the prestige. It's this family, community, making a real difference in people's lives." Amanda's eyes widened as she began to understand where he was going. Max and Lily leaned in, hanging on his every word. "I've decided to cut back on my surgery hours," Alexander continued. "I'm going to be focusing more on patient care and advocacy. The hospital is setting up a new program to help families navigate complex medical and social situations. They've asked me to head it up." "That's wonderful, Alexander," Amanda said softly. "It suits you perfectly." Alexander nodded, feeling a sense of rightness settle over him. "And as for moving in, well, that might be a bit premature. But I was hoping, if it's all right with all of you, that I might be a frequent visitor. Maybe even have my own drawer and toothbrush here eventually." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Max and Lily launched themselves at him, enveloping him in a group hug. Amanda's eyes shone with happy tears as she joined the embrace. "I think that can be arranged," she whispered, her voice full of promise. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Alexander sat with his arm around Amanda, watching Max and Lily chase fireflies in the yard. He thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment, the pain, the struggles, but also the incredible joy and love they'd found along the way. He reached into his pocket, feeling the familiar shape of the wooden bird figurine. But this time, instead of keeping it to himself, he took it out and showed it to Amanda. "My father carved this for me when I left for medical school," he explained. "It was a reminder of where I came from, of the values my parents instilled in me. For years it sat on my desk, watching me lose sight of those values in my pursuit of success. But now—" He held out the figurine to Amanda. "Now, I think it belongs here, with all of us, a symbol of our past and a guide for our future." Amanda took the figurine gently, turning it over in her hands. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you for sharing it with us, for sharing everything with us." As Max and Lily came running back, excited to show off the fireflies they'd caught, Alexander felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. This was where he belonged. This was what healing truly meant. Not just mending bodies, but nurturing souls, building families, and creating a home filled with love and hope. The wooden bird figurine found a new place of honor on the mantle of their new home, a constant reminder of the incredible journey that had brought them all together. And as Alexander looked at the smiling faces around him, he knew that the best parts of that journey were still to come. They were no longer just birds weathering a storm. They were a flock, strong and united, soaring together towards a bright and boundless future. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of change as Dr. Alexander Hartley made his way through the bustling halls of Chicago Memorial Hospital. It had been 6 months since the trial, 6 months since he had taken on his new role as head of the hospital's family advocacy program. The familiar white coat felt different now, not a symbol of detached professionalism, but a reminder of the deeper, more personal level of care he now provided. As he approached the conference room, Alexander paused, taking a deep breath. Today's meeting was particularly important. They were finalizing the details of a new initiative, one that had been inspired by his experience with Max and Lily. "Good morning, everyone," he said as he entered the room, greeted by the faces of social workers, psychologists, and fellow doctors. "Let's get started, shall we?" For the next hour, they discussed the finer points of the Healing Hearts program, a comprehensive support system for children with serious medical conditions and their families. It went beyond just medical care, addressing the emotional, social, and practical needs that often fell through the cracks of the healthcare system. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Marcus Reeves approached Alexander, a look of admiration on his face. "Hartley, I have to hand it to you. This program, it's going to change lives. You've really found your calling here." Alexander smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you, Marcus. It means a lot to hear you say that. But it's not just me. This entire team, the whole hospital, we're all part of this change." As they walked out together, Marcus hesitated, then asked, "How are they doing? Max, Lily, and Amanda?" Alexander's smile widened. "They're doing wonderfully. Max's latest checkup showed his heart is stronger than ever. Lily's art therapy is helping her process everything she's been through. And Amanda, she's starting a support group for parents who've been separated from their children due to circumstances beyond their control." Marcus nodded approvingly. "And you, how are you managing to balance it all?" Alexander chuckled. "It's a juggling act some days, but honestly, I've never been happier. Speaking of which," he glanced at his watch, "I need to head out. It's family dinner night." As Alexander drove to the modest suburban home that had become his second home and was quickly becoming his primary residence, he reflected on the whirlwind of changes the past months had brought. His relationship with Amanda had deepened, growing into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a love that had taken them both by surprise. He pulled into the driveway, the sound of laughter spilling out from the open windows bringing a smile to his face. Inside, he found a scene of controlled chaos, Max and Lily at the kitchen table, homework spread out before them, while Amanda stirred something delicious smelling on the stove. "Dr. Hartley," Max called out, his face lighting up. "Can you help me with this math problem? It's about hearts, so I thought you'd be the expert." Alexander laughed, setting down his briefcase. "Sure thing, buddy, let's take a look." As he sat down beside Max, Lily pushed her sketchbook towards him. "I drew something for your office today," she said shyly. Alexander's breath caught as he looked at the drawing. It showed a group of people, doctors, patients, families, all connected by delicate strands that formed the shape of a heart. In the center of the heart stood 4 figures that were unmistakably Amanda, Max, Lily, and himself. "Lily, this is beautiful," he said softly. "It's perfect for the new program. Would you mind if we used it as our logo?" Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You want to use my drawing?" Amanda came over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your art is going to help a lot of people feel less alone." As they settled in for dinner, the conversation flowed easily. A mix of daily anecdotes, future plans, and shared dreams. Alexander found himself marveling at how natural it all felt, how seamlessly he had been woven into the fabric of this family. After the dishes were cleared and the kids were in bed, Alexander and Amanda sat on the back porch, mugs of tea in hand, enjoying the quiet of the evening. "I had a call from Sarah today," Amanda said softly, referring to her sister, Jack's ex-wife. Alexander turned to her, concern etching his features. "How is she doing?" Amanda sighed. "Better, I think. She's still in therapy, working through everything Jack put her through. But she asked if she could come visit, meet the kids." Alexander reached out, taking Amanda's hand in his. "How do you feel about that?" "I'm nervous," Amanda admitted. "There's so much history there, so much pain. But she's family. And after everything we've been through, I think it might be healing for all of us." Alexander nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Whatever you decide, We'll face it together. All of us." As they sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Alexander felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The journey that had begun with a desperate plea in a hospital corridor had led him here, to a life richer and more fulfilling than he ever could have imagined. The wooden bird figurine on the mantel inside caught his eye, its wings spread wide, ready for flight. It was no longer just a reminder of his past, but a symbol of their shared future, a future built on compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. As Amanda leaned her head on his shoulder, Alexander knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, be it bridging old family divides or helping other families navigate their own storms, they would face them together. For in each other, in Max and Lily, and in the work they were doing, they had found not just healing but a purpose that would continue to shape lives for years to come. The night air carried the promise of new beginnings, of bridges yet to be built, and hearts yet to be healed. And Dr. Alexander Hartley, once driven by ambition and accolades, now found himself exactly where he was meant to be, at the heart of a family, at the forefront of change, forever committed to the truest form of healing. The day of Sarah's visit dawned bright and clear, a crispness in the air hinting at the approaching winter. Inside the warm kitchen of their home, Dr. Alexander Hartley watched as Amanda fussed over last-minute preparations, her nervous energy palpable. "Everything looks perfect," he assured her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "It's going to be okay." Amanda took a deep breath, leaning into his touch. "I know. It's been so long. What if the kids don't like her? What if she judges us for everything that's happened?" Alexander turned her to face him, his eyes full of understanding. "The kids are resilient and open-hearted, and Sarah has been through her own struggles. This is a chance for healing, remember? For all of you." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs. Max and Lily burst into the kitchen, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Is Aunt Sarah here yet?" Max asked, peering out the window. Lily hung back a little, clutching her ever-present sketchbook. "What if she doesn't like my drawings?" Alexander knelt down to their level, his voice gentle but firm. "Your Aunt Sarah is going to love you both, just as you are. And Lily, your art has the power to bring people together, never doubt that." Just then the doorbell rang, its chime seeming to echo through the suddenly quiet house. Amanda froze for a moment, then squared her shoulders and moved towards the door. Alexander gave the children an encouraging smile before following her. The woman standing on the porch bore a striking resemblance to Amanda, though her face was more lined, her eyes carrying a weariness that spoke of hard years. But as she looked at her sister, a spark of hope ignited in those tired eyes. "Amanda," Sarah breathed, her voice cracking with emotion. For a moment, the sisters just stared at each other, years of separation and unspoken words hanging between them. Then, as if a dam had broken, they fell into each other's arms, tears flowing freely. Alexander ushered Max and Lily forward gently. "Sarah," he said softly, once the sisters had composed themselves, "I'd like you to meet Max and Lily." Sarah knelt down, her eyes drinking in the sight of her niece and nephew. "Hello," she said, her voice warm despite its tremor. "I've been dreaming of this moment for so long." Max, always the bolder of the two, stepped forward first. "Did you really live in a different country? Mum said you traveled a lot." Sarah laughed, the sound a bit rusty but genuine. "I did. Would you like to hear some stories?" As they moved into the living room, the initial awkwardness began to melt away. Sarah shared tales of her travels, the places she'd hidden when trying to escape Jack's influence. The children listened with rapt attention, while Amanda and Alexander watched the bonds of family begin to reform before their eyes. During a lull in the conversation, Lily shyly approached her aunt, holding out her sketchbook. "I drew this for you," she said softly. Sarah accepted the book with reverence, her eyes widening as she took in Lily's latest creation. It showed a family tree, its branches reaching towards a sun made of interlocking hearts. And there, on one of the branches, was a figure that was unmistakably Sarah, her arms open wide. "Oh, Lily," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." As the day wore on, Alexander found himself marveling at the resilience of the human spirit. Here was a family that had been torn apart by fear, trauma, and circumstance, slowly but surely knitting itself back together. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, of old hurts bubbling to the surface. But there was also laughter, forgiveness, and the unmistakable warmth of love rekindled. Later, as they all sat around the dinner table, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. "To family," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Both the one we're born into and the one we choose, and to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," they all echoed, the clink of glasses ringing out like a promise. After Sarah had left, with plans made for future visits and a standing invitation to holiday gatherings, Alexander helped Amanda clean up the kitchen. The children had gone to bed, the excitement of the day finally catching up with them. "How are you feeling?" Alexander asked, watching Amanda's face carefully. She was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Whole," she said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel whole." Alexander pulled her into an embrace, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. This journey had brought healing not just to Amanda and her children, but to him as well. In helping this family find their way back to each other, he had found his own path, his true calling. As they stood there in the quiet kitchen, the wooden bird figurine caught Alexander's eye from its place of honor on the mantel. It seemed to him that its wings were spread wider than ever, ready to soar to new heights. He thought back to the day he had first met Max and Lily, to the desperate surgery that had saved Max's life and set them all on this unexpected path. He thought of the challenges they had faced, the fears they had overcome, and the love that had blossomed amidst it all. "You know," he said softly, "I think it's time we made it official." Amanda looked up at him, a question in her eyes. Alexander smiled, his heart full to bursting. "I want to adopt Max and Lily. If you're agreeable, of course, make our family legal in the eyes of the world, the way it already is in our hearts." Tears sprang to Amanda's eyes as she nodded enthusiastically. "Yes," she whispered. "Oh, Alexander, yes." As they sealed the decision with a kiss, Alexander felt as if his life had come full circle. He had started this journey as a surgeon focused on mending hearts in the operating room. Now, he had found his true purpose in healing hearts and souls, in building a family and a future based on love, compassion, and unwavering support. The wooden bird figurine seemed to glow in the soft light of the kitchen, a testament to the power of change, the strength of love, and the endless possibilities that await when we open our hearts to the unexpected turns of life. As Alexander and Amanda made their way upstairs to check on the sleeping children, their children, the promise of tomorrow hung in the air. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. But together as a family, they were ready to spread their wings and soar, their hearts beating as one, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The courthouse bustled with activity, but for Dr. Alexander Hartley, the world had narrowed to the small family beside him. Amanda stood to his right, her hand clasped tightly in his, while Max and Lily fidgeted in their best clothes, a mix of excitement and nervousness on their young faces. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and Alexander felt his heart leap into his throat. This was it, the moment that would officially make them a family in the eyes of the law. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Alexander's mind wandered back over the whirlwind of the past few months. The decision to adopt Max and Lily had set off a flurry of activity, paperwork, home studies, interviews. Through it all, the support from their extended family and the hospital community had been overwhelming. He thought of Dr. Marcus Reeves, who had not only provided glowing character references, but had also become a frequent guest at their family dinners, of Nurse Chen, who had organized a surprise adoption shower, filling their home with gifts and well wishes, of Sarah, who had flown in specifically for this day, determined to be there as her niece and nephew gained a father in truth as well as in heart. The judge's voice brought Alexander back to the present. "Having reviewed all the documentation and testimonies, I am pleased to declare that the adoption of Max and Lily by Dr. Alexander Hartley is hereby approved and finalized." A cheer went up from the small crowd of supporters in the courtroom. Alexander felt tears spring to his eyes as Max and Lily threw themselves into his arms, their voices a jumble of "Dad" and "Thank you" and "We love you." Amanda wrapped her arms around all of them, her own tears flowing freely. "We're officially a family now," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. As they made their way out of the courthouse, they were greeted by a surprise. The steps were lined with people from the hospital, doctors, nurses, patients, and families who had been touched by the Healing Hearts program. They erupted into applause as the newly official family emerged. At the bottom of the steps stood Dr. Reeves, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "Congratulations, Hartley," he said, shaking Alexander's hand warmly. "Or should I say congratulations to the whole Hartley family." The celebration continued at their home, the backyard transformed into a festive wonderland. As Alexander watched Max and Lily running around with their friends, accepting congratulations from well-wishers and basking in the love that surrounded them, he felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. Later in the evening, as the party wound down, Alexander found himself alone for a moment on the back porch. He pulled out the wooden bird figurine, which he had carried in his pocket for luck throughout the proceedings. "I thought I'd find you out here," Amanda's voice came from behind him. She joined him, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Alexander smiled, showing her the figurine. "I was just thinking about how far we've all come. This little bird has seen quite a journey." Amanda nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "From a reminder of your past to a symbol of our future. It's beautiful, Alexander." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars twinkle into existence in the darkening sky. Then a thought struck Alexander. "You know," he said slowly, "the Healing Hearts program has been doing amazing work. But I can't help feeling there's more we could do." Amanda looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Alexander's eyes lit up with the spark of a new idea. What if we could expand the program, create a foundation that could help families like ours across the country, provide medical care, legal support, counseling, everything we needed during our journey? Amanda's face broke into a radiant smile. "Alexander, that's a wonderful idea, and I think I know just the artist to design our logo," she added with a wink, nodding towards Lily, who was showing her latest sketches to Sarah and some other guests. As they rejoined the party, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. The adoption was not an end, but a beginning, the start of a new chapter filled with possibilities and the chance to help even more families heal and grow. The wooden bird figurine seemed to pulse with warmth in his pocket, a reminder of the incredible journey that had brought them all together and the exciting path that lay ahead. As he looked around at the faces of his family, Amanda, Max, Lily, and all the extended family they had gathered along the way, Alexander knew that together they could accomplish anything. The stars continued to shine brightly overhead, a celestial celebration of love, family, and the power of open hearts to change the world, one life at a time. 1 year had passed since the joyous day of Max and Lily's adoption, and the Hartley household was abuzz with excitement. The living room had been transformed into a makeshift auditorium with chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small podium. Today was the official launch of the Hartley Family Foundation, and supporters from all walks of life had gathered to witness the beginning of a new chapter in their journey. Dr. Alexander Hartley stood at the window, watching as the last of the guests arrived. He felt a familiar flutter of nerves in his stomach, reminiscent of the days before a challenging surgery. But this, he knew, was so much more than any operation he had ever performed. "Nervous?" Amanda's voice came from behind him, warm and reassuring. She joined him at the window, slipping her hand into his. Alexander smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "A little. It's a big step we're taking today." Amanda nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "It is. But look at how far we've come, Alexander. Think of all the families we'll be able to help." Their moment was interrupted by Max and Lily, who came bounding into the room, their faces alight with excitement. "Dad, Mom, is it time yet?" Max asked, practically bouncing on his toes. Lily, ever the artist, was clutching a large poster board. "I finished the visual aid for your speech, Dad. Want to see? Alexander knelt down, marveling once again at the creativity and compassion of his children. It looks wonderful, Lily. Thank you both for all your help. Are you ready to greet our guests? As the children scampered off to fulfill their roles as junior hosts, Alexander took a deep breath, straightening his tie. The wooden bird figurine sat on the mantel, its wings spread wide, a constant reminder of the journey that had led them here. The living room filled quickly with a diverse group of supporters. There was Dr. Marcus Reeves, who had become not just a colleague but a friend, his gruff exterior softened by the genuine smile on his face. Nurse Chen sat near the front, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of joy. Sarah, now a regular presence in their lives, chatted animatedly with some of the families who had been helped by the Healing Hearts program. As Alexander took his place at the podium, a hush fell over the room. He looked out at the sea of faces, medical professionals, social workers, families whose lives had been touched by their work, and felt a surge of gratitude and purpose. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice strong and clear. "A little over a year ago, I stood in an operating room, facing what seemed like an impossible challenge. I thought I was there simply to save a life. What I didn't realize was that I was about to embark on a journey that would save my own soul." He went on to recount the story of Max and Lily, of the challenges they had faced and the love that had blossomed amidst the chaos. He spoke of the gaps in the system they had encountered, the need for a holistic approach to healing that addressed not just medical needs, but emotional and social ones as well. "That's why we're here today," Alexander continued, his passion evident in every word. "The Hartley Family Foundation isn't just about providing medical care or financial support. It's about creating a network of compassion, a safety net for families who are facing their darkest hours. It's about reminding people that they are not alone, that there is always hope, always a way forward." As he spoke, Lily's poster board was revealed, showing a beautifully rendered image of a flock of birds in flight, each one representing a different aspect of the Foundation's work: medical care, legal aid, counseling, education support. At the center of the flock was a larger bird, its wings spread protectively over the others, a clear homage to the wooden figurine that had become their family's talisman. Amanda joined Alexander at the podium, her presence a steadying force beside him. "We've seen firsthand the difference that comprehensive support can make," she added. "Our goal is to replicate the care and compassion we received, to create a model that can be implemented in communities across the country." As they outlined the Foundation's initiatives, from mobile health clinics to legal advocacy programs to family counseling services, Alexander could see the excitement building in the room. Heads nodded in agreement, and there was a palpable sense of hope and possibility in the air. When they opened the floor for questions, the response was overwhelming. Offers of support poured in, from financial pledges to promises of volunteer hours. Dr. Reeves stood up, clearing his throat gruffly. "Chicago Memorial is prepared to offer full backing to the Foundation," he announced. "We'll provide space for your headquarters and access to our resources. It's time we took a more holistic approach to healthcare, and the Hartley Family Foundation is leading the way." As the event wound down, with people mingling and discussing future collaborations, Alexander found a quiet moment to stand with his family. Max and Lily were bubbling over with excitement, already planning ways they could contribute to the Foundation's work. "I can teach art classes for the kids in the hospital," Lily suggested, her eyes shining. Max nodded enthusiastically. "And I can be a junior counselor talking to kids who are scared about their heart surgeries." Amanda wrapped her arms around the children, her eyes meeting Alexander's over their heads. The love and pride that passed between them needed no words. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the children were tucked into bed, Alexander and Amanda stood on the back porch, looking up at the stars. "We did it," Amanda said softly, leaning her head on Alexander's shoulder. Alexander nodded, his arm tightening around her waist. "We're just getting started," he replied. "But yes, we did it, together." As a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change and new beginnings, Alexander thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a desperate night in a hospital to the launch of a foundation that would touch countless lives, It had been a path filled with challenges, love, and unexpected blessings. The wooden bird figurine, now a symbol not just of their family, but of hope for so many others, seemed to glow in the moonlight from its place of honor on the mantel. Its wings, once a reminder of Alexander's past, now represented the soaring possibilities of the future they were building together. As Alexander and Amanda made their way back inside, hand in hand, they knew that this was not an ending, but a beautiful new beginning. The Hartley Family Foundation was more than just an organization. It was a testament to the power of love, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of family, both chosen and found. The stars twinkled overhead, silent witnesses to a story of healing, hope, and the extraordinary change that can happen when open hearts come together to make a difference in the world, one family at a time. 5 years had passed since the launch of the Hartley Family Foundation, and the impact of their work had spread far beyond the borders of Chicago. Dr. Alexander Hartley stood at the podium of a grand auditorium, addressing a room full of medical professionals, social workers, and families from across the country. "When we started this journey," Alexander began, his voice strong and clear, "we had no idea how far it would take us. We simply knew that there was a need for compassion, for understanding, and for a holistic approach to healing that goes beyond the confines of a hospital room." As he spoke, his eyes scanned the crowd, picking out familiar faces. There was Max, now a teenager, sitting tall and proud. His latest checkup had shown his heart was as strong as any of his peers. Beside him sat Lily, her sketchbook open on her lap, her talented hands capturing the essence of the moment in swift, sure strokes. Amanda stood to the side of the stage, her presence a constant source of strength and love. She caught Alexander's eye and smiled, a smile that still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. "Today," Alexander continued, "we're not just celebrating the success of the Hartley Family Foundation. We're celebrating each and every one of you, the doctors who have embraced our holistic approach to care, the social workers who have gone above and beyond to support families in crisis, and most importantly, the families themselves who have shown incredible resilience and love in the face of unimaginable challenges." He went on to outline the Foundation's achievements, the network of family support centers that had been established in hospitals across the country, the scholarship program for children with chronic illnesses, the advocacy work that had led to changes in healthcare policy. As Alexander concluded his speech, a surprise awaited him. Max and Lily took the stage, along with dozens of other children and families who had been helped by the Foundation over the years. "Dad," Max said, his voice cracking with emotion, "we want to thank you, not just for saving my life all those years ago, but for giving so many other kids and families the chance at a better life." Lily stepped forward, unveiling a large canvas. On it was a stunning painting, a massive tree, its branches reaching towards the sky. And on each branch, worked in exquisite detail, were hundreds of tiny birds in flight. "This is for you, Dad," Lily said softly. "Each bird represents a life you've touched, a family you've helped. And look," she pointed to the trunk of the tree, where the familiar shape of the wooden bird figurine had been lovingly recreated. "It all started with this, with your heart opening to us." Alexander felt tears well up in his eyes as he embraced his children, overwhelmed by the love and gratitude surrounding him. As the auditorium erupted in applause, he knew that this moment, this family, this legacy of compassion, was the true measure of his life's work. The wooden bird figurine, which still held a place of honor in their home, had been more than just a talisman. It had been a guide, leading them all on an extraordinary journey of love, healing, and hope. The sun was setting on a warm summer evening as Dr. Alexander Hartley stood in the backyard of their family home. The space was filled with laughter and chatter, a joyous cacophony that warmed his heart. It was a special day, the 10th anniversary of Max and Lily's adoption, and the whole extended family had gathered to celebrate. Alexander's eyes roamed over the scene, taking in the tapestry of love that had been woven over the years. Max, now a young man, was deep in conversation with Dr. Marcus Reeves. He had just been accepted to medical school, determined to follow in his father's footsteps and make a difference in people's lives. Lily, her artistic talent having blossomed over the years, was showing her latest paintings to Sarah and Amanda. Her work, inspired by their family's journey, had gained recognition in galleries across the city, spreading messages of hope and resilience. Amanda caught his eye from across the yard and made her way over, slipping her hand into his. "Penny for your thoughts, love?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. Alexander smiled, pulling her close. "Just marveling at how far we've come, how much love there is in this family we've built." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a young couple pushing a stroller. They were the newest family to be helped by the Hartley Foundation, parents of a baby girl born with a complex heart condition, much like Max had been all those years ago. "Dr. Hartley," the young father said, his voice filled with emotion, "we just wanted to thank you. The support we've received, it's made all the difference." Alexander knelt down to peek at the sleeping baby, his heart swelling with a familiar mix of compassion and determination. "You're not alone in this journey," he assured them. "We're here for you, every step of the way." As the evening wore on, Alexander found himself standing on the back porch, the wooden bird figurine in his hands. He ran his fingers over its smooth surface, marveling at how this small object had been the catalyst for so much change. Max and Lily joined him, their faces glowing in the soft light of the setting sun. "Hey, Dad," Max said softly, "we've been thinking about the future of the foundation." Lily nodded, her eyes shining with purpose. "We want to take a more active role, to carry on the work you and Mom started." Alexander felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by pride and love for his children. "Nothing would make me happier," he said, pulling them both into a tight embrace. As they stood there, arms around each other, Alexander realized that this moment of love, of passing the torch to the next generation, was the true culmination of their journey. The wooden bird figurine had once been a symbol of his past, then of their family's resilience. Now it represented a legacy of compassion and healing that would continue long into the future. Amanda joined them on the porch, completing their family circle. Together they looked out over their gathered loved ones, a tapestry of chosen family, friends, and lives touched by their work. "You know," Alexander said softly, "when I first became a doctor, I thought healing was all about mending bodies. But this journey has taught me that true healing is about mending hearts and souls. It's about family, in all its beautiful, complex forms." As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Alexander felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The journey that had begun with a desperate plea in a hospital corridor had led to this, a life overflowing with love, purpose, and the joy of making a difference in the world. The wooden bird figurine seemed to pulse with warmth in his hand, a living reminder of the power of open hearts to change lives. As he looked at his family, at Amanda, Max, and Lily, Alexander knew that their story was far from over. It would continue to unfold, touching more lives, healing more hearts, and spreading wings of hope for generations to come. In that moment, surrounded by the love of his family and the legacy they had built together, Dr. Alexander Hartley knew that he had found the truest, most profound healing of all, the healing that comes from a life lived with compassion, courage, and an open heart. The stars shone brightly overhead, silent witnesses to a story of love, family, and the extraordinary change that can happen when we open our hearts to the unexpected turns of life. And in the gentle night breeze, one could almost hear the whisper of wings, a promise of new beginnings, of lives touched, and of a legacy of love that would endure for years to come.